She was the wolf no one wanted, until the most dangerous alpha in the territory claimed her for a reason that could destroy them both. Tonight, you're about to witness a story of survival, betrayal, and a choice that changes everything. A runt wolf faces the ultimate humiliation until a scarred, brutal alpha makes her an offer she can't refuse. But his intentions aren't what they seem, and the price of acceptance might be her life. Will she survive the trials that break warriors twice her size? Will their bond become real, or will it kill her first? Stay until the end to find out. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's begin. The claiming ceremony always started the same way. First came the drums, low, rhythmic, bone-deep thuds that echoed across the valley like a second heartbeat. Then the fires, dozens of them, roaring to life in a perfect circle around the stone platform where the unmated wolves would stand. And finally, the crowd, hundreds of pack members gathered in the cold mountain air, their breath rising in clouds, their eyes sharp and hungry for the spectacle to come. Calith Vorn stood at the edge of that platform, arms wrapped tight around herself, and tried not to shake. Not from the cold. She'd grown used to that. The frontier territory was brutal year-round, and tonight was no exception. Snow clung to the pines beyond the firelight, and the wind cut through the clearing like a blade. But Calith had survived 17 winters here. Cold was nothing. No. What made her shake was the waiting. Around her, the other unmated females preened and postured, adjusting furs, smoothing hair, standing taller to catch the eye of potential mates. They were all bigger than her, stronger, more beautiful by pack standards, broad-shouldered, thick-furred, built for the hard life of the northern packs. Warriors and hunters, every one of them. And then there was Calith, small, thin, her wolf form barely larger than a juvenile's, her human frame lean to the point of frailty. No scars from victorious hunts, no stories of battles won, just the runt who'd somehow survived this long by staying out of the way. She didn't belong here. Everyone knew it. "Look at her," someone whispered behind her. Calith didn't turn. She didn't need to. She recognized Mira's voice, a huntress 3 years her senior, already claimed by a mid-rank warrior last season. Still standing there like she has a chance. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Calith's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes forward, fixed on the ceremonial fire in the center of the platform. The elders stood beside it, 3 ancient wolves in human form, their faces carved from stone and time. They would oversee the claims, they would bless the bonds, they would witness her humiliation. "Silence!" Elder Torvald's voice cut through the murmurs like a whip crack. The crowd obeyed instantly. Torvald was old, but his authority was absolute. He raised one gnarled hand toward the platform. "The claiming ceremony begins. Unmated males, step forward and speak your choice. The female may accept or refuse. Once claimed and accepted, the bond is witnessed and sealed before the pack." It was tradition, ancient, sacred, and for Calith it was a death sentence of a different kind. The first male stepped forward, a broad-chested hunter named Gareth. His eyes swept across the platform, lingering on the stronger females before settling on a huntress named Syra. "I claim Syra Blackpaw as my mate." Syra's face lit up. "I accept." Cheers erupted. The elders nodded their approval. One by one, the claims came. Males stepped forward, females accepted, their faces flushed with pride and relief. The platform grew emptier, the crowd grew louder, and Calith stood there, invisible. She'd known this would happen. She'd told herself it didn't matter, that she'd endure it, hold her head high, and walk off that platform with whatever dignity she could scrape together. But knowing and experiencing were two different things. By the time the 8th claim was made, only 4 females remained on the platform. 3 of them still held hope in their eyes. Calith had none left. "Pathetic," someone muttered from the crowd. Calith didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. The 9th male stepped forward. He was older, a widower with graying hair and a limp from an old injury. Decent, kind by pack standards. His eyes skimmed past Calith without pausing and landed on a sturdy female named Brenna. "I claim Brenna Stoneheart as my mate." Brenna hesitated, clearly hoping for someone younger, stronger, but a claim was a claim. "I accept." 3 left, then 2. Calith stood alone. The silence that followed was crushing. No murmurs now, no whispers, just the crackling of the fires and the wind through the trees, and the weight of hundreds of eyes on the runt who dared to stand among the worthy. Elder Torvald's expression softened, almost. Is there any male who would claim Calith Vorn? Nothing. Calith's throat burned. She forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Very well, Torvald began, his tone formal. By pack law, an unclaimed wolf may remain unmated, and I claim her. The voice came from beyond the firelight, deep and rough as gravel scraped over stone. Every head turned. Calith's heart stopped. A figure stepped into the light, and the crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps, murmurs, a few wolves instinctively stepping back. Even the elders stiffened. Ronan Drax. Calith had never seen him in person, but everyone knew the stories. Alpha of the High Peak Pack, the most brutal territory in the northern mountains. A warrior who'd killed his own father to claim leadership. A wolf so scarred and savage that even seasoned fighters avoided his gaze. He was massive, taller than any male on the platform, shoulders like a landslide, arms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories of survival most wolves wouldn't live through. His hair was dark, shot through with gray despite his relative youth, pulled back in a rough tie. His face was all hard angles and old wounds, a jagged scar running from his left temple down to his jaw. But it was his eyes that froze Calith in place. Cold, gray as winter steel, and fixed directly on her. He crossed the clearing with the easy, predatory grace of something that had never known fear. The crowd parted for him without question. When he reached the platform, he didn't climb up. He simply stood there, towering over everyone, and spoke again. I claim Calith Vorn as my mate. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Elder Torvald recovered first. Alpha Drax, you honor us with your presence, but forgive me, you lead your own pack. Surely there are stronger wolves in your own territory who— I didn't ask for advice, Elder. Ronan's voice was flat, emotionless. I made a claim. Witness it or don't. Either way, my decision stands. Torvald's jaw worked. He glanced at the other elders, who looked equally shaken. Finally, he turned to Calith. The choice is yours, Calith Vorn. Do you accept or refuse? Every eye turned to her. Calith couldn't breathe. This didn't make sense. Ronan Drax was a legend. Brutal, yes, but powerful beyond measure. His pack controlled the richest hunting grounds in the north. He could have any female he wanted. Strong warriors, proven huntresses, wolves worthy of an alpha. Why her? She looked up at him, searching for an answer in that scarred face. He gave her nothing. No warmth, no explanation. Just that cold, steady gaze that seemed to see straight through her. This wasn't love. It wasn't even desire. It was something else, something that terrified her. But then she looked past him, at the crowd, at Mira's smug face, at the males who'd ignored her, at the life waiting for her if she refused, unclaimed, unwanted, a burden tolerated out of obligation until she either died quietly or left the pack in shame. Calith had spent 17 years invisible. Maybe it was time to be something else. She lifted her chin and met Ronan's eyes. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. I accept. The crowd erupted. Shock, outrage, confusion. Someone shouted a protest. Another laughed in disbelief. The elders scrambled to restore order. Ronan ignored all of it. He stepped onto the platform, closed the distance between them in 2 strides, and stopped so close she had to tilt her head back to see his face. Pack your things, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. We leave at dawn. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Calith standing in the firelight, heart pounding, mind reeling, wondering if she'd just made the bravest decision of her life, or signed her own death warrant. Aset. The celebration that followed the ceremony was loud, chaotic, and entirely focused on everyone but Calith. She slipped away before the first round of drinking started, retreating to the small den she'd called home for as long as she could remember. It wasn't much. A hollowed-out space beneath the roots of an old pine, barely large enough to stand in, furnished with a worn bedroll and a few belongings she'd scavenged over the years. But it was hers, or it had been. Calith sat on the bedroll, hands shaking, and tried to process what had just happened. Ronan Drax had claimed her. Why? She turned the question over and over, searching for an answer that made sense. He hadn't looked at her with desire, hadn't spoken with affection. There'd been no warmth in his eyes, no softness in his voice, just cold calculation. He wanted something from her. But what could she possibly offer an alpha like him? The answer eluded her. A knock on the wood frame above her den made her jump. "Caleth?" The voice was familiar. Her cousin Alara, one of the few wolves who'd ever shown her kindness. "Can I come in?" "Yeah." Alara ducked inside, her broad frame barely fitting through the entrance. She was everything Caleth wasn't: strong, confident, a skilled tracker. She'd been claimed 3 years ago by a good male, and they had a daughter now, a healthy pup with her mother's bright eyes. She looked at Caleth with something between concern and disbelief. "Are you insane?" Caleth almost laughed. "Probably." "Caleth, that's Ronan Drax. Do you know what they say about him? He killed 12 wolves in a single challenge fight when he took leadership. 12. His own pack fears him. And you just accepted him?" "What was I supposed to do?" Caleth's voice came out sharper than she intended. "Stand there and let everyone watch me walk off that platform alone? Spend the rest of my life as the runt no one wanted? You'd be alive." "Would I?" Caleth met her cousin's eyes. "Really? How long do you think I'd last here, Alara? Unmated, no status, no protection, the next harsh winter, the next famine, the next culling of the weak. How long before someone decides I'm not worth the food I eat?" Alara's face softened. "We wouldn't let that happen." "You can't promise that." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Alara sighed and sat beside her. "What did he say to you after the claim?" "Pack your things. We leave at dawn." "That's it?" "That's it." Alara shook her head slowly. "He's using you for something. You know that, right? Alphas like him don't claim runts out of kindness." "I know." Caleth's voice was quiet. "But whatever he wants, it's got to be better than this." She wasn't sure she believed that, but she needed to. Alara stayed for another hour, helping her pack the few belongings worth taking: spare clothes, a hunting knife, a small pouch of herbs for wounds. When she finally left, she hugged Caleth tight and whispered, "If you need to run, run. Don't let pride kill you." Caleth nodded, but they both knew she wouldn't run. She'd made her choice. Dawn came cold and gray. Caleth stood at the edge of the settlement, her small pack slung over one shoulder, watching the sky lighten beyond the mountains. Around her, the pack was just beginning to stir, early risers emerging from dens, smoke rising from cooking fires, the usual sounds of morning routine. No one came to say goodbye. She hadn't expected them to. "Ready?" Caleth spun around. Ronan stood a few feet away, dressed for travel in heavy furs and worn leather, a pack twice the size of hers strapped across his back. He looked even more intimidating in the gray light of dawn, bigger, harder, a force of nature given human shape. "I'm ready," Caleth said. He nodded once and turned north toward the mountains. She followed. They walked in silence for the first hour, Ronan setting a brutal pace that had Caleth's legs burning within minutes. She didn't complain, didn't ask for a break, just focused on keeping up, on matching his stride, on proving she could at least do this much. The terrain grew rougher as they climbed: loose stone, steep inclines, patches of ice hidden beneath thin snow. Caleth slipped twice, catching herself both times before she fell. Ronan didn't slow down, didn't look back. By midday, her lungs were screaming and her muscles shook with exhaustion. "We'll stop here," Ronan said suddenly, gesturing to a flat outcrop sheltered by a cliff face. Caleth nearly collapsed with relief. She dropped her pack and sank onto a rock, trying to catch her breath without looking like she was dying. Ronan pulled food from his pack: dried meat, hard bread, a skin of water. He tossed half to her without a word. They ate in silence. Caleth watched him from the corner of her eye, trying to read him. He ate efficiently, methodically, like it was a task to complete rather than a pleasure. His eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, never still, always alert. A warrior's instincts. "Why did you claim me?" The question left her mouth before she could stop it. Ronan's eyes flicked to her. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, finally, "You're small." Caliph blinked. That's a reason? You're small, weak, and unmated. No one expected me to choose you. That makes you useful. The bluntness of it hit her like a slap. Useful how? My pack has enemies, rivals, wolves who want me dead and would use any weakness against me. He took another bite of bread, chewed, swallowed. A strong mate would be a target, a prize worth fighting for, but you? His eyes swept over her, cold and assessing. You're not worth the effort. They'll underestimate you, dismiss you, and that gives me an advantage. Caliph's stomach twisted. So I'm bait? You're a strategy. And if your strategy gets me killed, then you weren't strong enough to survive anyway. The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. Ronan finished his food, wiped his hands on his pants, and stood. Rest for 10 minutes. Then we move again. We need to reach the border before nightfall. He walked to the edge of the outcrop, leaving Caliph sitting there, numb. She'd known this wasn't love, but hearing it laid out so plainly, hearing herself reduced to a tactical decision, a piece on a board, something expendable, made it real in a way that twisted something deep in her chest. She wanted to scream at him, to throw the food in his face and turn back. But she didn't. Because as brutal as his honesty was, it was still more than her old pack had ever given her. At least here, she had a purpose, even if that purpose might kill her. Jab. They reached the high peak border just as the sun touched the horizon. Caliph had heard stories about this place, the savage pack that controlled the harshest territory in the north, where only the strongest survived and weakness was culled without mercy. She'd imagined something dark and foreboding, a settlement built from bones and blood. The reality was worse. It wasn't the place itself. The dens were well-built, sturdy structures dug into the mountainside and reinforced with stone and timber. Smoke rose from multiple fires, voices echoed across the clearing, wolves talking, laughing, living. It was the way they looked at her. Every conversation stopped as Ronan led her through the settlement. Every eye turned to track her movement. And in those eyes, Caliph saw confusion, contempt, and something darker. Hunger. Not the sexual kind, worse, the kind that sized up prey. A massive male with a scarred muzzle stepped into their path. He was nearly as big as Ronan, though younger, with the arrogant posture of someone who'd never lost a fight. "This is the mate you claimed?" His voice dripped with disbelief. He circled Caliph slowly, looking her up and down like she was a piece of meat gone bad. "I've seen pups bigger than her." "Thane!" Ronan's voice carried a warning. Thane ignored it. He stopped in front of Caliph, leaning down until they were eye level. "What's your name, little wolf?" "Caliph." "Caliph." He drew out the syllables mockingly. "And tell me, Caliph, what makes you think you'll survive even one night here?" Caliph's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "I don't know, but I'm here anyway." Thane's eyes flashed with something, surprise maybe, or irritation. He straightened and looked at Ronan. "The council's going to have questions, Alpha. You know that." "Let them ask. And when they demand trials, then she'll face them." Thane's smile was sharp and cruel. Looking forward to it. He walked away, and the crowd slowly dispersed, though Caliph could still feel their eyes on her back. Ronan led her to a den near the center of the settlement, larger than the others, reinforced with heavy timber, marked with symbols she didn't recognize. Alpha's quarters. Inside it was surprisingly warm. Furs lined the walls. A fire burned in a stone hearth. Shelves held weapons, maps, supplies. It was organized, efficient, designed for function rather than comfort. Ronan dropped his pack and turned to her. "You'll sleep here. There's food in the stores, water from the spring. Don't wander the settlement alone, don't trust anyone, and stay out of the council's way until the trials." Trials? Pack law. A new mate brought from outside must prove their worth. 3 trials. If you pass, you're accepted. If you fail... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "When?" Caliph's voice came out smaller than she wanted. 3 days. Use the time to rest. You'll need it." He moved toward the door. "Ronan." He paused, didn't turn. "Why tell me the truth?" Caliph asked. "Back on the mountain. You could have lied, made it sound better. Why be honest?" For a long moment he stood there, silent. Then quietly, because lies get you killed faster than truth. And he left her alone in the den, surrounded by the belongings of a wolf she didn't know, in a pack that saw her as prey, facing trials designed to break her. Kalith sank onto the furs and finally let herself shake. She'd made her choice. Now she had to survive it. The next 3 days passed in a haze of fear and preparation. Kalith barely left the den. Ronan came and went on pack business, meetings with the council, patrols along the border, disputes to settle. He didn't speak to her beyond basic instructions, didn't ask how she was adjusting, didn't offer comfort or reassurance. But he also didn't leave her defenseless. On the second day, he returned with a set of training clothes, tough leather and wool, sized for someone small. He dropped them on the furs without a word and left again. On the third day, he brought weapons. A knife, well-balanced and sharp. A short staff, reinforced with iron bands. "The trials won't be easy," he said. "Learn to use these or die trying." He didn't offer to train her. Kalith taught herself. She spent hours in the small clearing behind the den, practicing strikes, grips, defensive stances. Her muscles screamed, her hands blistered. But she didn't stop, because she'd seen the way the pack looked at her, and she knew what would happen if she failed. On the evening of the third day, Ronan returned and said simply, "Tomorrow at dawn, first trial." Kalith didn't sleep that night. She lay on the furs, staring at the ceiling, running through every scenario she could imagine. What if the trial was combat? She'd lose. What if it was a hunt? She'd fail. What if it was survival? Maybe she had a chance. But deep down, she knew the truth. These trials weren't designed for someone like her to pass. They were designed to break her. Dawn came too fast. Ronan woke her with a hand on her shoulder, firm, impersonal. "It's time." Kalith dressed in the training clothes, strapped the knife to her belt, and followed him outside. The entire pack had gathered in the central clearing. Hundreds of wolves, human and shifted, formed a massive circle around a flat stretch of ground marked with stones. At the far end stood the council. 5 wolves, older and battle-scarred, their faces carved from granite and judgment. Thane stood among them, smiling. Kalith's stomach dropped. Ronan led her to the center of the circle and stopped. He didn't look at her, didn't offer encouragement. He simply stepped back and left her standing alone. One of the council members, a scarred female with gray-streaked hair, raised her voice. "Kalith Vorn, you stand before the High Peak Pack as an outsider claiming the right to be Alpha's mate. By our law, you must prove your worth through 3 trials. Survive all 3, and you will be accepted. Fail, and you will be cast out. Or worse." Kalith's throat was bone dry, but she managed to nod. "The first trial," the council member continued, "is combat." Of course it was. "You will face a warrior chosen by the council. The fight ends when one of you submits, is knocked unconscious, or dies. Weapons are allowed, shifting is allowed, there are no other rules." A murmur ran through the crowd. Excitement, anticipation. They wanted blood. The council member's eyes gleamed. "Your opponent is Thane Blackridge." The crowd roared approval. Thane stepped forward, cracking his knuckles, his smile widening. He was enormous, easily twice her weight, built like a landslide. And he moved like someone who'd killed before and enjoyed it. Kalith's hand shook as she pulled the knife from her belt. This wasn't a trial. It was an execution. Thane shifted mid-stride, bones cracking, fur erupting, his body expanding into a massive wolf form that dwarfed anything Kalith had ever seen. His eyes were yellow and merciless. Kalith didn't shift. She couldn't. Her wolf form was small, weak. It would only make her an easier target. So she stood there, human and tiny, holding a knife against a predator built to kill. The council member raised her hand. "Begin!" Thane lunged. Kalith dove to the side, barely avoiding jaws that snapped shut where her throat had been a second earlier. She hit the ground hard, rolled, came up running. The crowd screamed. Thane spun with impossible speed for his size, paws tearing up dirt as he charged again. Kalith feinted left, then darted right, slashing wildly with the knife. The blade caught fur, drew blood. Not much, just a shallow cut along his shoulder. It only made him angrier. He slammed into her like a boulder, sending her flying. Kalith hit the ground so hard the air exploded from her lungs. Stars burst across her vision. Before she could move, Thane was on top of her, one massive paw pinning her chest, claws digging through leather into skin. Pain screamed through her ribs. The crowd was chanting something. She couldn't make out the words over the roaring in her ears. Thane's jaws opened above her throat. This is it, Calith thought distantly. This is how I die. But then her hand, still clutching the knife, moved on pure instinct. She drove the blade upward, hard and fast, straight into the soft tissue beneath Thane's jaw. He yelped and jerked back, blood spraying. Calith rolled out from under him, gasping, clutching her ribs. The knife was still embedded in his jaw. She'd lost her only weapon. Thane shifted back to human, yanking the knife out with a snarl of pain and rage. Blood poured down his neck, but it wasn't a killing blow, just painful. He was done playing. He came at her again, faster now, brutal. A punch to her stomach doubled her over. A kick to her side sent her sprawling. She tasted copper, felt ribs crack. Calith tried to get up. Her body wouldn't obey. Thane grabbed her by the throat, lifted her off the ground like she weighed nothing. His eyes were wild with fury and pain. "Submit," he growled. Calith couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, but she met his eyes and spat blood in his face. His grip tightened. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. And then, "Enough!" Ronan's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. Thane froze. The crowd went silent. Ronan stepped into the circle, his expression unreadable. "She hasn't submitted, and you haven't won. Release her." "She's finished, Alpha," Thane snarled. "Look at her. She can barely stand." "I didn't ask for your assessment. Release her. Now." For a long, tense moment, Thane didn't move. Then slowly, he opened his hand. Calith collapsed to the ground, gasping, coughing up blood. Ronan looked down at her. "Can you stand?" Every nerve in her body screamed, "No." But Calith planted her hands in the dirt, trembling, and forced herself up, first to her knees, then, agonizingly, to her feet. She swayed, barely conscious, ribs screaming, throat bruised, but she was standing. Ronan turned to the council. "She didn't submit. The trial continues." "Alpha," the scarred female said carefully. "She's half dead. This is... The trial continues until someone submits or dies. Those are your rules. Follow them." The council member's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Very well." Ronan turned back to Thane. "Finish it, or submit yourself." Thane's face twisted with rage, but also something else. Calculation. He looked at Calith, broken and bleeding, barely able to stay on her feet, and he smiled. "I submit." The crowd erupted in shock and anger. Calith's legs gave out. She hit the ground hard, consciousness fading. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Ronan's voice, cold and final. "Trial 1 complete. She passes." Equals. Calith woke to pain, not the sharp, immediate kind that demands attention, but a deep, grinding ache that had settled into her bones and refused to leave. Her ribs throbbed with every breath. Her throat felt like raw meat. When she tried to move, her body protested so violently she had to bite back a scream. "Don't!" The voice came from her left. Calith turned her head, slowly, carefully, and found an older woman sitting beside the furs, grinding something in a stone bowl. She had iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe braid, and the kind of face that had seen too much to be shocked by anything anymore. "Who?" Calith's voice came out as a rasp that barely qualified as sound. "Drink this first." The woman held out a cup filled with something that smelled like dirt and rotting plants. "It'll help with the pain. Maybe." Calith wanted to refuse, but the pain won. She took the cup with shaking hands and drank. It tasted worse than it smelled, but within minutes the grinding ache dulled to something almost bearable. "I'm Vera," the woman said, returning to her grinding. "Pack healer. Ronan brought you here 3 days ago, more dead than alive. Broken ribs, bruised windpipe, internal bleeding. You're lucky Thane didn't crush your skull." 3 days? Calith's head spun. She'd lost 3 entire days? "You needed them. Your body was shutting down." Vera's tone was matter-of-fact, clinical. "Though I'll admit, I didn't think you'd wake up. Most wolves your size wouldn't have survived what Thane did to you." Why did he submit? The question had been burning in the back of Calith's mind since consciousness returned. "He had me. He could have killed me. Vera's hands paused. She looked at Caliph with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. It was hard to tell. Because Ronan made it clear that if Thane killed you in trial, it would be seen as murder, not victory, and murdering the Alpha's mate carries a death sentence, trial or not. So he was protecting me. He was protecting his strategy. Vera resumed grinding. Don't mistake necessity for affection, girl. Ronan claimed you for a reason, and that reason has nothing to do with your well-being. The words stung, but they weren't wrong. Caliph struggled to sit up. Pain exploded through her ribs, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself upright. The room spun. Her vision grayed at the edges. What are you doing? Vera demanded. How long until the second trial? You just woke up from 3 days of unconsciousness. You need rest, not... How long? Vera's eyes narrowed. Then grudgingly, 2 days. The council wanted to start immediately, but Ronan convinced them to wait until you could stand. 2 days, 48 hours to prepare for whatever fresh hell they'd designed to break her. I need to train, Caliph said. You need to heal. I can't afford to heal, not fully. Caliph swung her legs off the furs, ignoring the way her body screamed in protest. They want me to fail. The trials aren't meant to test me. They're meant to destroy me. So I can either lie here and wait for them to finish what Thane started, or I can figure out how to survive. Vera studied her for a long moment. You're insane. Probably. Caliph planted her feet on the ground, stood. The world tilted violently, but she locked her knees and refused to fall. But I'm still here. For the first time, something like approval flickered across Vera's face. Ronan said you were stubborn. I thought he was being generous. Where is he? Border Patrol. There's been movement from the Red Claw pack. Scouts? Maybe raiders. He won't be back until nightfall. Vera packed her supplies into a worn leather bag. If you're determined to be stupid, at least be smart about it. No weapons training, no combat drills. Your ribs can't take it, but you can think, plan, and learn the terrain. The second trial won't be another fight. The council knows you barely survived the first. They'll choose something that exploits your other weaknesses. Like what? That depends on what they think will break you fastest. Vera stood, slinging her bag over one shoulder. My advice? Figure out what you're worst at. That's what they'll test. She left without another word. Caliph stood alone in the healing den, every muscle trembling with effort, and took inventory of her weaknesses. The list was long. She was small, weak, unskilled in combat, unfamiliar with the territory, an outsider with no allies and no pack bonds to rely on. She couldn't outfight them, couldn't outrun them, couldn't match their strength or experience, but she could think. And thinking had kept her alive this long. Caliph spent the rest of the day exploring the settlement, slowly, carefully, trying not to look like she was dying with every step. She memorized paths between dens, noted where supplies were stored, observed the pack's routines and hierarchies. She learned quickly that the High Peak pack was nothing like her old territory. Here, strength wasn't just valued, it was worshipped. Disputes were settled with claws and teeth. Rank was earned through blood. The weak were either cold or enslaved, forced into menial labor until they died or fled. There was no safety net, no mercy for those who couldn't keep up. And at the center of it all was Ronan. Caliph saw his influence everywhere, in the way warriors deferred to his judgment, in how disputes ended the moment his name was mentioned, in the careful, controlled violence that kept the pack functional but brutal. He ruled through fear and respect in equal measure, and she was supposed to be his mate. The thought made her stomach twist. By evening, Caliph's legs were shaking so badly she could barely walk. She returned to Ronan's den and collapsed onto the furs, gasping, ribs screaming. She'd overdone it, badly. But she'd also learned something important. The pack respected strength, yes, but they also respected cunning. The wolves who survived longest weren't always the biggest or strongest. They were the ones who knew when to fight and when to maneuver. That was her only advantage, and she'd need every bit of it. Ronan returned after dark, covered in dirt and smelling like pine and old blood. He paused when he saw her awake, then crossed to the water basin without a word and began washing his hands. Vera said you were walking around today, he said, his back to her. Against her advice. I needed to see the settlement. You needed to rest. I don't have time to rest. Kalith forced herself to sit up, ignoring the pain. The second trial is in 2 days. What is it? Ronan dried his hands and turned to face her. In the firelight, his scars looked deeper, darker. The hunt. Kalith's stomach dropped. What kind of hunt? They'll release you into the deep forest with no supplies, no weapons, and a 12-hour head start. Then they'll send trackers after you. If you make it back to the settlement before they catch you, you pass. If they catch you, he didn't finish. What happens if they catch me? Depends on who catches you first. His expression was unreadable. Some of the trackers will be under orders to bring you back alive. Others won't. You can't control them? I could, but the council would see that as interference. It would weaken your trial, make it meaningless. He moved to the shelves and began organizing weapons. A mindless task, something to occupy his hands. You wanted this, Kalith. You accepted the claim knowing what it meant. Now you have to survive it. I know. She did. But that didn't make it easier. The forest is dangerous even without trackers hunting you, Ronan continued. Steep ravines, ice fields, predators, and the terrain is unfamiliar. You've never traveled this territory. Then teach me. He stopped, glanced at her. What? You know this territory better than anyone. You know the dangers, the safe paths, the places to hide. Kalith met his eyes. Teach me. Give me a chance. The trial starts in 2 days. There's no time for... Then we start now. Ronan stared at her like she'd suggested something insane. You can barely stand. I can stand well enough. It was a lie. Legs were trembling just from sitting upright, but she forced conviction into her voice. You claim me because you thought I'd be useful. I'm trying to stay alive so I can be useful. Help me or don't. But don't pretend you care about my well-being when we both know you don't. The words came out harsher than she'd intended. For a long moment, Ronan didn't react. Then, quietly, You think I don't care if you live or die? You said it yourself. I'm a strategy. Strategies fail all the time. His jaw tightened. He crossed the den in 3 strides and stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to see his face. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and cold. I claimed you because you were expendable in everyone else's eyes. That made you safe to claim without inviting challenge. But I didn't drag you here to watch you die in a trial designed by wolves who want to humiliate me through you. If you fail, it reflects on my judgment, my leadership, and I don't fail. Then help me not fail. I am helping you. By not interfering, by letting you prove yourself without my protection, undermining your victory. His eyes bored into hers. The pack needs to see you survive on your own strength, not mine. I don't have strength. Then find something else. He turned and walked to the far side of the den, effectively ending the conversation. Kalith sat there, frustrated and exhausted, ribs aching, head spinning. He was right. She knew that. If he helped her too openly, it would poison any respect she might earn. But knowing that didn't make it less terrifying. She lay back down, staring at the ceiling. 2 days, 48 hours to prepare for a trial that could kill her a dozen different ways. And she had to do it alone. The next morning, Kalith woke before dawn and forced herself to move despite the pain. She couldn't train with weapons or practice combat, but she could build endurance. So she walked, slow, agonizing circuits around the settlement, pushing through the burning in her ribs until her vision blurred. Other wolves watched her with expressions ranging from contempt to curiosity. A few laughed. Most ignored her. One didn't. You're wasting your time. Kalith stopped and turned. A young female stood a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes sharp. She looked about Kalith's age, maybe a year older, with dark hair braided back and the lean build of a scout. Excuse me? Building endurance, the female said, nodding at Kalith's shaking legs. It won't help. The hunt isn't about outlasting them. It's about outsmarting them. Kalith studied her warily. And you're telling me this because... because watching you stumble around like a wounded deer is depressing. The female uncrossed her arms and stepped closer. I'm Senna, scout, mid-rank. And before you ask, no, I'm not your friend. But I also don't think the trials should be rigged to guarantee failure. That's cowardice, not strength. The council doesn't see it that way. The council is full of old wolves who haven't hunted in years. They design trials based on tradition, not practicality. Senna glanced around, making sure no one was listening. You want to survive the hunt? Stop trying to be faster or stronger. You won't be. Focus on being smarter. I'm listening. Senna's smile was sharp. The trackers they'll send after you are good, the best in the pack. They know every path, every hiding spot, every trick. You can't outrun them, and you can't hide from them using normal methods. Then what do? You make them track the wrong thing. Kalith blinked. How? False trails, scent markers in the wrong direction, disrupted tracks. Make them waste time chasing shadows while you take a path they won't expect. Senna's eyes gleamed. And whatever you do, don't head for the settlement directly. They'll set ambushes on every obvious route. You need to circle wide, stay off the main paths, and come in from an angle they won't anticipate. It made sense, perfect sense, but Kalith couldn't shake her suspicion. Why are you helping me? Senna's expression hardened. Because I was you once. 3 years ago, I came from a weak pack, claimed by a male who saw me as breeding stock and nothing else. The council forced me through trials too, trying to break me, and someone, one person, gave me advice that saved my life. I'm paying that forward. What happened to your mate? Dead? Challenge fight 2 years ago. I survived. He didn't. Senna's voice was flat, emotionless. Now I'm just another scout. Which is fine. Better than being someone's possession. Kalith wanted to ask more, but Senna was already turning to leave. One more thing, Senna said over her shoulder. Don't trust anyone in this pack. Not fully. Not even Ronan. Everyone here has an agenda. Survival is the only thing that matters. She disappeared between the dens before Kalith could respond. Kalith stood there, processing. Senna's advice was good, brilliant even, but the warning lingered. Don't trust anyone, even the wolves offering help. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Kalith couldn't practice physical skills, but she could study maps, crude drawings Ronan kept in the den showing territory boundaries, landmarks, and danger zones. She memorized everything she could, the location of ravines, ice fields, predator dens, water sources. By evening, her head ached from concentration and her ribs screamed from sitting upright too long. Ronan returned after dark again, this time carrying fresh meat from a hunt. He cooked it over the fire without speaking, and they ate in tense silence. Finally, Kalith broke it. A scout named Senna gave me advice today. Ronan's eyes flicked to her. What kind of advice? How to survive the hunt. False trails. Unexpected routes. Kalith watched his face for a reaction. Should I trust her? Senna's smart, one of the best scouts in the pack. He took another bite of meat, chewed, swallowed. But she's also ambitious. She sees you as an opportunity. Opportunity for what? To gain favor. If you survive using her advice, she can claim part of the credit. It raises her status without risking anything. He set down his food and looked at her directly. That doesn't mean her advice is bad. Just understand that no one here does anything without calculating the benefit. Including you? Especially me. At least he was honest. Kalith finished eating and moved to the furs, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Tomorrow was the last day before the trial, her last chance to prepare. Kalith? She looked back. Ronan was still sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. The hunt is designed to isolate you, to make you feel hunted, helpless. That's when most wolves break. Not from physical exhaustion, but from fear. I'm already scared. Good. Fear keeps you alert, but don't let it paralyze you. His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. Almost. You've survived this long by being smart and stubborn. Don't abandon that in the forest. It was the closest thing to encouragement he'd ever given her. Kalith nodded, throat tight, and lay down. She didn't sleep. The morning of the second trial arrived cold and unforgiving. Kalith stood at the forest's edge, dressed in light clothes, no furs, no boots, nothing that would help against the elements. The council had stripped her of everything except a thin tunic and pants. No weapons. No food. No water. 12 hours. That's all the head start they'd give her. The entire pack had gathered to watch her leave, their faces a mix of anticipation and contempt. Thane stood among them, his jaw still bandaged from where she'd stabbed him. He caught her eye and smiled, cold, cruel, hungry. The council's scarred female stepped forward. Calith Vorn, the second trial begins now. You will enter the forest and attempt to return to the settlement within 3 days. Trackers will be released 12 hours after you depart. If you return before they catch you, you pass. If they catch you... She paused. Well, we'll see what happens then. The crowd murmured with dark excitement. Calith's heart hammered against her ribs, still tender, still painful. She scanned the faces one last time, looking for Ronan. He stood at the back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Their eyes met. He gave her the barest nod. It would have to be enough. Begin, the council member said. Calith ran. The forest swallowed her whole within minutes. Dense pines blocked out most of the sunlight, turning the world into a twilight maze of shadows and snow. The ground was uneven, treacherous, covered in ice that sent her slipping twice in the first 100 yards. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Her bare feet went numb almost immediately. But she didn't stop. Senna's advice echoed in her head. Make them track the wrong thing. Calith headed northwest at first, moving fast and careless, leaving obvious tracks in the snow. Then, after about a mile, she found a stream, half frozen, but with enough running water to hide her scent. She waded into it, gasping as the icy water bit into her legs, and followed it upstream for as long as she could stand. When hypothermia started to set in, she climbed out on the opposite bank and changed direction entirely. Southeast now, moving more carefully, stepping on rocks where she could to minimize tracks. It was exhausting. Every step was agony. Her feet bled. Her ribs felt like they were grinding against each other. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and thirst made her tongue thick and clumsy. But she kept moving. Hours blurred together. The sun crawled across the sky, hidden behind clouds. Calith had no idea how much time had passed. 6 hours? 8? The head start was running out. She needed to find shelter, somewhere to rest without being immediately visible. Ahead, the terrain changed. The forest gave way to a rocky slope, steep and treacherous. Calith climbed carefully, using exposed roots and stones as handholds, until she found what she was looking for, a narrow crevice between two boulders, barely wide enough to squeeze into. She wedged herself inside and finally let herself stop. The relief was overwhelming. Calith pressed her back against cold stone and closed her eyes, just for a moment, trying to catch her breath. Mistake. The moment she stopped moving, everything hit her at once. The pain, the cold, the sheer impossibility of what she was trying to do. She was barefoot, injured, freezing, and being hunted by wolves who'd been tracking prey since before she was born. I'm going to die out here. The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. Calith shoved it away. She couldn't afford doubt. Not now. She forced her eyes open and assessed her situation. The crevice was good, hidden, defensible. But she couldn't stay here long. The trackers would be released soon, and if she wasn't moving, they'd close the distance fast. Rest. Just an hour. Then keep going. Calith pulled her knees to her chest, trying to conserve warmth, and waited. The howl came sooner than expected, distant, maybe 2 miles away, but unmistakable. The trackers had been released, and they were hunting. Calith scrambled out of the crevice, biting back a cry as her ribs protested. No time to rest now. No time for pain. She ran. The terrain grew worse, steeper, icier, dotted with ravines that appeared without warning. Calith nearly fell into one, catching herself at the last second on a tree root. Her hands were numb. Her feet left bloody prints in the snow. Another howl. Closer this time. They were gaining. Panic threatened to swallow her, but Calith forced it down. Think, think. She couldn't outrun them. But she could still outmaneuver them. Ahead, she spotted something promising, a dense thicket of thorny bushes, nearly impenetrable. Most wolves would avoid it, too painful, too slow to navigate. Calith dove in. The thorns tore at her skin, her clothes, her hair. She crawled on her hands and knees, ignoring the pain, forcing herself deeper into the thicket until she found a small hollow at the center. She pressed herself flat against the ground and waited. Minutes passed. Then she heard them, paws on snow, heavy breathing, the low rumble of communication between pack members. "Lost the trail," a male voice growled. "She went to ground somewhere." "Spread out," another voice commanded. "Check the ravines. She's injured. She can't have gone far." Footsteps moved away. Calith didn't breathe. She stayed frozen in that hollow for what felt like hours, every muscle locked, certain that any movement would give her away. Finally, when the forest fell silent again, she dared to move. Crawling out of the thicket was even worse than entering. By the time she emerged, her skin was shredded, her tunic torn, her hands slick with blood. But she was alive, and the trackers had moved on. Calith oriented herself using the position of the fading sun and started moving again, slower now, more carefully. She couldn't afford another close call like that. Night fell fast in the mountains. Within an hour, the world was pitch black, lit only by a sliver of moon. Calith stumbled more than walked, relying on touch and instinct to avoid obstacles. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard running water. A stream. Calith followed the sound and found it. A narrow creek, mostly frozen, but with a trickle of water still flowing beneath the ice. She broke through the thin ice with a rock and drank greedily, ignoring the way the cold made her teeth ache. Then she kept moving. She walked through the entire night, driven by fear and stubbornness in equal measure. Every shadow looked like a wolf. Every sound was a tracker closing in. But dawn came eventually. Gray light filtered through the trees, and Calith realized she'd made it through the first night. 1 day down, 2 to go. Her body was failing. She knew that. Her feet were destroyed, her ribs worse, her hands shaking from cold and exhaustion. But she was still moving, still alive. By midday, Calith recognized landmarks from the maps she'd studied. She was getting close, maybe 10 miles from the settlement, close enough to hope. But the howls started again, more of them this time, coordinated, closing in from multiple directions. They'd picked up her trail. Calith's heart sank. She was too slow, too injured, too visible in the daylight. They'd catch her before nightfall. Unless... An idea formed, desperate, insane, but maybe her only chance. She was near one of the ice fields marked on Ronan's maps. Dangerous terrain, unstable. Most wolves avoided it, but if she could cross it, she might lose them. Calith changed direction, heading straight for the ice field. It appeared suddenly, a vast expanse of frozen ground, glittering and deadly. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface. In places, the ice was thin enough to see dark water beneath. One wrong step would send her plunging through, but the trackers were close. She could hear them now, paws pounding, voices calling to each other. No choice. Calith stepped onto the ice. It creaked beneath her weight. She took another step. Another. Moving as quickly as she dared, testing each footfall before committing. Behind her, the trackers burst from the tree line. "There!" someone shouted. Calith ran. The ice screamed beneath her feet. Cracks shot outward with every step. She heard shouting behind her, the trackers arguing about whether to follow. Halfway across, the ice gave way. Calith plunged into freezing water so cold it stopped her heart for a second. She went under completely, the current dragging at her, pulling her down. No. She kicked hard, broke the surface, gasped for air. Her hands found the edge of the ice, slippery, impossible to grip. She tried to pull herself up and failed. Tried again, failed again. Her body was shutting down. Hypothermia was setting in fast. "I'm going to die." But then her hand found a crack in the ice. She jammed her fingers into it, ignoring the pain, and hauled herself up. Once. Twice. She rolled onto solid ice, gasping, shaking violently. Behind her, the trackers had stopped at the edge of the ice field. They weren't following. Too dangerous. Calith forced herself to stand and kept moving. Slower now, every step a battle. She made it across the ice field and collapsed on solid ground, vision graying. She couldn't feel her feet anymore, couldn't feel her hands. But the settlement was close. So close. Calith crawled, then walked, then stumbled. The sun was setting when she finally saw it, the high peak settlement, fires burning in the distance. A howl sounded behind her. The trackers still hunting. Calith ran. Her body had nothing left, but she ran anyway, driven by pure will. The settlement grew closer, 50 yards, 30, 20. The trackers burst from the forest behind her, 10 yards. She could see wolves gathering at the settlement's edge, watching. 5 yards. A massive wolf, Thane, leapt at her from the side. Calith threw herself forward, hit the ground hard, and rolled across the boundary line just as Thane's jaws snapped shut where her throat had been. Silence. Then slowly, the gathered pack began to murmur. Calith lay on the frozen ground, shaking, bleeding, barely conscious. But she was inside the settlement. She'd made it. The council's scarred female stepped forward, her expression unreadable. Trial 2 complete. She passes. The last thing Calith heard before darkness took her was Thane's furious snarl. And then, nothing. Consciousness returned in fragments, pain first, sharp and everywhere, then cold, then voices arguing somewhere above her head. Should be dead. Look at her feet, the frostbite alone, but she's not dead. She made it back. Barely. And now what? The third trial will kill her for certain. That's the point. Calith tried to open her eyes. The effort felt monumental. Her eyelids were heavy, crusted with something, blood maybe, or ice. When she finally managed it, the world swam into blurry focus. Vera's face hovered above her, grim and tight-lipped. Behind the healer stood 3 council members, their expressions ranging from impressed to openly hostile. She's awake, Vera said flatly. The scarred female council member, Calith still didn't know her name, leaned in closer. Calith Vorn, you have passed 2 trials. The third and final trial will begin in 5 days. Use that time wisely. 5 days? Vera's voice rose. She needs 3 weeks minimum to recover from this. Her feet are shredded, her ribs are still broken, and she's suffering from severe hypothermia. 5 days is a death sentence. The law allows 5 days between trials, no more. The council member's tone was ice. If she cannot recover in time, perhaps she was never worthy. You're rigging this. You know that, right? You're designing trials specifically to— Enough! The command came from the doorway. Ronan. He filled the entrance to Vera's healing den, face carved from stone, eyes colder than Calith had ever seen them. The council has spoken. 5 days. Vera looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Ronan's expression stopped her. She turned back to Calith instead, jaw tight with fury. Fine. 5 days. But she stays here until then. No interruptions, no visitors. She needs complete rest. The council members filed out without another word. Ronan lingered for a moment, his gaze fixed on Calith. She tried to read his expression and found nothing. No relief that she'd survived, no concern for her condition, just that familiar cold assessment. Then he turned and left. The door closed. Calith lay there, staring at the ceiling, and finally let herself feel it. All of it. The pain, the exhaustion, the bone-deep terror of what was coming. I can't do this, she whispered. Vera was grinding something in her stone bowl, back turned. No, you probably can't. The honesty was almost comforting. What's the third trial? I don't know. Vera poured boiling water over the ground herbs, releasing a bitter smell. The council keeps it secret until the day of. But based on the first 2, she trailed off. Tell me. Vera turned, holding a steaming cup. The first trial tested your ability to endure physical harm. The second tested your survival instincts and cunning. The third will test something else, something deeper. Like what? Your will to live when there's no hope left. Your ability to stand when everything in you screams to surrender. Vera's eyes were hard. They want to break you completely, not your body, your spirit. Calith's throat tightened. How do I prepare for that? You don't. Vera handed her the cup. Drink. It'll help with the pain and the infection setting in. Then sleep. That's all you can do now. The liquid burned going down, but within minutes the sharp edges of pain dulled. Calith's eyes grew heavy. Vera? Her voice slurred. Why does the council hate me so much? The healer was quiet for a long time. Finally, because you're proof that their system is flawed. You're weak by their standards, small, injured, an outsider. You shouldn't have survived even 1 trial, but you did, twice, and that terrifies them. Because if you can survive, If you can earn your place here, then everything they believe about strength and worth is a lie. So they'll keep trying to kill me until you're dead or you prove them wrong so completely they have no choice but to accept you. Vera pulled a blanket over her. Sleep, girl. You'll need it. Kalith wanted to stay awake, to think, to plan, but her body had other ideas. She sank into darkness like a stone dropped in deep water. The next 4 days blurred together in a haze of enforced rest and brutal recovery. Vera worked on Kalith's feet with grim determination, cleaning wounds, treating frostbite, wrapping them in poultices that smelled like death but slowly, agonizingly, began to heal the damaged tissue. You'll lose 2 toes on your left foot, Vera said on the second day, matter of fact. Maybe 3. The frostbite is too severe, but the rest should recover, eventually. Kalith stared at the ceiling and didn't cry. Crying wouldn't help. Can I walk? Not well. Not for weeks. Vera's hands were gentle despite her harsh words. But you'll manage. Pain will be constant. I can handle pain. We'll see. Visitors came despite Vera's orders, pack members curious about the runt who'd survived impossible trials, warriors assessing a potential weakness in their alpha's choice, scouts reporting back to whoever had sent them. Vera chased most of them off with sharp words and sharper glares. But on the 3rd day, someone got through. Senna slipped into the den while Vera was gathering supplies outside, moving with the practiced silence of a scout. She crouched beside Kalith's bedroll, eyes sharp. You look terrible, she said. Thanks. Kalith's voice was rough from disuse. What are you doing here? Paying respects to the dead. Senna's smile had no humor in it. Because that's what you'll be in 2 days. You came to tell me I'm going to die? No, I came to tell you what the 3rd trial is. Senna glanced at the door, listening. I have a friend on the council staff. She talks when she drinks, and last night she drank a lot. Kalith struggled to sit up despite the pain. What is it? The abyss. The word hung in the air like a curse. Kalith had heard of it. Everyone in the northern packs had. A deep chasm in the mountains, carved by ancient glaciers, so deep that anything thrown into it disappeared without sound. Pack law said criminals sentenced to death were cast into the abyss. No one who entered ever came out. They're going to throw me into a chasm? Not exactly. Senna's expression was grim. There's a way down, a narrow path along the cliff face, barely wide enough to walk. At the bottom is a cave system. Your trial is to climb down, retrieve a marked stone from the deepest chamber and climb back up, alone, within 3 days. Kalith's stomach dropped. That's impossible. Yes, that's the point. Senna leaned closer. No one has completed the Abyss trial in 50 years. The last wolf who tried fell to his death on the 1st day. Before that, there were 3 attempts. All failures, all deaths. Then why give me the trial at all? Why not just execute me? Because that would look like murder. This way it's your failure, your weakness. Ronan can't protest without looking like he's protecting you, which undermines his authority. And the council gets exactly what they want, you dead and Ronan humiliated. The calculation was brutal, elegant, and completely effective. There has to be a way, Kalith said, more to herself than Senna. Some trick, some strategy. There isn't. Senna cut her off. I've seen the abyss. I've studied the path. It's a sheer cliff face with handholds that crumble if you breathe wrong. And that's assuming you can even climb down without falling, which you probably can't with your injuries. She stood. I'm sorry. I wanted to warn you so you'd have time to prepare. Prepare for what? My death? Or to run? Senna moved to the door. No one would blame you. You've survived 2 impossible trials. That's more than anyone expected. Leave tonight. Head south. Don't look back. And go where? I have no pack, no allies. I'd be a rogue. Better a live rogue than a dead mate. Senna paused at the threshold. But if you're determined to die for pride, at least die knowing you fought harder than anyone thought possible. She left before Kalith could respond. Kalith lay there, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. The abyss. 3 days. Impossible. She could run. Senna was right about that. Slip away in the night, disappear into the wilderness. She'd survived the forest once. Maybe she could do it again, but then what? A life of running, hiding, always looking over her shoulder, always alone. That wasn't survival. That was just a slower death. The door opened. Vera returned, arms full of supplies, and stopped when she saw Kalith's face. What happened? Senna told me what the third trial is. Vera's expression darkened. Damn her. I told everyone. She caught herself. The abyss? Kalith nodded. Vera was quiet for a long time. Then she set down her supplies and sat heavily on a stool. I won't lie to you, that trial is designed to kill. The council chose it specifically because there's no strategy, no cunning that can help you. It's pure physical endurance and climbing skill, and you have neither. So I'm dead. Probably. Vera met her eyes. But if you're determined to try anyway, there's one thing that might help. What? The path down is narrow and treacherous. Most wolves try to climb it in human form because shifted forms are too large, too clumsy. But your wolf form is small. Vera leaned forward. Smaller than any adult wolf in this pack. If you shift, you might be able to navigate sections that would be impossible for a human. Lower center of gravity, 4 legs instead of 2, claws for grip. Kalith considered it. Her wolf form was small, yes, weak and underdeveloped by pack standards. But maybe in this one situation, that weakness could become a strength. It's a risk, Vera continued. If you get stuck mid-shift, or if the path is too narrow even for your wolf, you'll die. But it's the only advantage I can think of. I'll take it. Then you have 2 days to practice shifting and climbing. Your feet won't be fully healed. It'll hurt like hell. But pain won't kill you. Falling will. Vera stood and offered her hand. Come on. We start now. The next 2 days were agony. Vera took Kalith to a rocky outcrop behind the settlement where the terrain was steep and treacherous. She forced her to practice climbing, first in human form, then shifted, then alternating between the two. Every step sent fire shooting through Kalith's damaged feet. Her ribs screamed with each movement. She fell twice, hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. But she got back up. She had to. On the second day, Ronan appeared at the practice site. He stood at a distance, watching in silence as Kalith struggled up a particularly difficult rock face. When she finally reached the top, gasping and shaking, he spoke. You're wasting your time. Kalith didn't have the energy to argue. She just looked at him. The abyss isn't like the forest, Ronan continued. There's no room for cleverness, no false trails or unexpected routes, just you and the cliff. And you're not strong enough. I know. He stepped closer. Then why try? Because giving up isn't an option. Kalith forced herself to stand despite the trembling in her legs. You claimed me. Put me in this position. If I fail, it reflects on you. So maybe stop telling me I'm going to die and start helping me survive. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. I can't help you, he said quietly. Not openly. The council is watching everything. Any assistance I provide will invalidate the trial. Then help me secretly. There's no secret advantage I can give you for the abyss. It's just stone and gravity and will. Then tell me something useful. Anything. Kalith's voice cracked with desperation. You know that chasm. You've been there. Tell me what I'm walking into. Ronan was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear. The darkness is absolute below the first 100 feet. You'll need to climb by touch alone, and the stone is unstable. Old glacier carving, constantly shifting. Handholds that seem solid will crumble without warning. How do I know which ones are safe? You don't. You guess. And if you guess wrong, you fall. Not helpful, but it was something. The cave system at the bottom, Kalith pressed. How do I find the marked stone? Follow the water. There's an underground stream that runs through the deepest chamber. The stone will be on a pedestal in the center. And getting back up? His expression was grim. That's the part that kills most wolves. The climb down is hard. The climb up is impossible. Your muscles will be exhausted, your hands will be shredded, and you'll be carrying extra weight. The stone? He nodded. Kalith's mind raced, trying to find an angle, a strategy, but there wasn't one. This trial was exactly what Vera had said, pure physical endurance. No tricks, no cunning, just survival. Why did you really claim me? The question came out before she could stop it. The truth this time. Not strategy, not tactics. Why me? Ronan looked at her for a long time. The afternoon light caught the scars on his face, making them look deeper, older. Because I was tired of watching wolves destroy each other for status, he said finally. This pack runs on strength and violence. It's effective, brutal, but it's also wasteful. We lose good wolves to stupid challenges. We exile anyone who doesn't fit the mold. And for what? To maintain a system that only benefits the strongest? He turned away, looking out over the settlement. You were weak by their standards, unwanted, but you survived anyway, through intelligence, through stubborn refusal to quit. That interested me, made me wonder if there was another way to be strong. And is there? I don't know yet. He glanced back at her. But if you survive the abyss, we'll find out together. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Ronan left without another word. Kalith stood there, watching him go, and felt something shift in her chest. Not love. She wasn't naive enough to call it that. But understanding, maybe. A fragile thread of connection. She'd survived the abyss. Not for the pack, not even for herself. For the possibility that this brutal, broken system could change. The night before the trial, Kalith couldn't sleep. She lay on the furs in Ronan's den, staring at the ceiling, running through every scenario. The climb, the darkness, the cave, the marked stone, the impossible journey back. Every scenario ended the same way, her body broken at the bottom of the abyss. Still awake? Kalith turned her head. Ronan sat by the fire, sharpening a blade with slow, methodical strokes. Can't sleep. Neither can I. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the scrape of whetstone on metal. Ronan? Yeah. If I don't come back, her voice caught. What happens to you? He didn't look up. The council will see it as proof that my judgment was flawed. They'll use it to challenge my leadership. Thane will probably make a move within a week. Will you win? Probably. He set down the blade. But it'll cost. Blood, loyalty, stability. The pack will fracture. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made the choice. I'll live with the consequences. He finally looked at her. But you're going to come back, because you're too stubborn to die. Kalith managed a weak smile. I hope you're right. I am. It sounded like a promise. Dawn came gray and cold. Kalith dressed in the clothes Vera had prepared. Tough leather reinforced at the knees and elbows, gloves with exposed fingers for grip, boots with metal cleats for traction. Her damaged feet screamed as she laced the boots tight, but she ignored the pain. Pain was familiar now, almost comforting. The entire pack gathered at the edge of the settlement, just like before. But this time the mood was different, quieter, more solemn. They weren't expecting a trial. They were expecting a funeral. Kalith walked through the crowd, head high, refusing to show fear. She spotted Senna near the back, face carefully neutral. Vera stood with the healers, jaw tight. Thane watched from the council's side, eyes gleaming with anticipation. And Ronan stood alone, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. The council's scarred female stepped forward. Kalith Vorn, your final trial begins now. You will descend into the abyss, retrieve the marked stone from the deepest chamber, and return within 3 days. No assistance, no weapons, no supplies beyond what you carry. She held out a small pack, empty except for a length of rope and a single torch. Kalith took it. If you succeed, you will be recognized as Alpha's mate and full pack member. If you fail, the council member's eyes were hard. The abyss keeps its dead. I understand. Then go. The walk to the abyss took 2 hours. It was located in the most desolate part of the territory, a barren stretch of rock and ice where nothing grew and no prey ventured. The chasm itself was a scar in the earth, a massive crack that seemed to go down forever. Kalith stopped at the edge and looked down. Darkness, absolute and complete. The path was exactly as Ronan had described, a narrow ledge carved into the cliff face, barely wide enough for one person. In some places, it disappeared entirely, leaving gaps that would require jumps across empty air. This was insane, but she'd known that already. Kalith secured the pack, lit the torch, and started down. The first 50 feet weren't terrible. The path was narrow, but solid, the handholds plentiful. Kalith moved slowly, testing each step, keeping her breathing steady. Then the path narrowed, and narrowed further. By the time she reached the 100-foot mark, she was moving sideways, back pressed against the cliff, torch held out in trembling hands. The light barely penetrated the darkness below. She could see maybe 10 feet ahead. Everything beyond that was void. Her damaged feet throbbed with every step. The rope in her pack was useless, nothing to anchor it to. She kept going. At 200 feet, the torch began to sputter. Kalith had been conserving it, moving in darkness when possible, and only lighting it to check her path. But the flame was dying. Another 50 feet and it went out completely. Total darkness swallowed her. Kalith pressed herself against the stone, heart hammering. She couldn't see her own hands, couldn't see the path, couldn't see anything. Follow the wall, feel for handholds, move slow. She did. Inch by inch, handhold by handhold, Kalith descended blind. Her world became touch and sound, the scrape of stone under her fingers, the rush of air from the chasm, the hammer of her own heartbeat. Time lost meaning. She might have been climbing for hours or days. There was no way to tell. And then her foot found nothing. Kalith froze. She'd reached one of the gaps Ronan had mentioned, a section where the path simply didn't exist. She felt along the wall, searching for any indication of where the path continued. There, maybe 4 feet across. A gap she'd have to jump blind. If she missed, she'd fall. If she hesitated, she'd lose her nerve. Kalith took a breath, counted to 3, and jumped. Her feet hit stone. Her hands scrambled for purchase. For one terrible moment, she thought she'd miscalculated. But then her fingers found a crack, and she hauled herself onto the ledge. Safe. She lay there, gasping, shaking, then kept going. The descent continued forever. Kalith's hands were raw, bleeding. Her feet screamed with every step. Exhaustion made her clumsy. Twice she almost fell, catching herself at the last second. But finally, her foot touched level ground. The bottom. Kalith collapsed against the wall, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. She'd made it down. Now she just had to find the cave, retrieve the stone, and climb back up. Simple. She laughed, a broken, desperate sound that echoed in the darkness. Then she forced herself to stand. Follow the water. Kalith listened. At first she heard nothing. Then, faint but unmistakable, the trickle of running water. She followed the sound, hands outstretched, moving through total darkness. The ground was uneven, littered with stones and debris. She tripped twice, fell hard, got back up. The sound of water grew louder. And then she felt it. Cool air, moving. A cave entrance. Kalith entered carefully, using the wall as a guide. The temperature dropped. The air smelled of mineral and old stone. The sound of water was loud now, echoing off unseen walls. She was close. The chamber opened up suddenly. She could tell by the way sound changed, became bigger. Kalith moved forward, hands sweeping the air, and her fingers hit something solid. A pedestal. And on top, a stone, smooth and marked with carved symbols. She'd found it. Kalith grabbed the stone and shoved it into her pack. It was heavier than expected, maybe 10 pounds of solid rock. Now the climb. The journey back up was worse than the descent. Kalith's muscles were already exhausted. The extra weight made every movement agonizing, and she was moving blind, relying entirely on memory and touch. She fell twice, short drops, caught by luck more than skill. Each time, she lost precious energy hauling herself back onto the path. Her hands were destroyed. The gloves had worn through, and her palms were raw meat. Every handhold was agony, but she climbed, hour after hour, handhold after handhold. The darkness never changed. Kalith lost track of time completely. She might have been climbing for 1 day or 3. There was no way to know. All she knew was that stopping meant death, so she didn't stop. And then, impossibly, she saw light. Faint. Gray. Far above. The top. Kalith almost wept. She climbed faster now, driven by desperate hope. The light grew stronger. She could see the path again, could see the rim of the chasm, 50 feet, 30, 20, 10. Her hand closed on solid ground. Kalith hauled herself over the edge and collapsed on frozen earth, gasping, shaking, barely conscious. She'd done it. She'd survived the abyss. But when she finally raised her head, ready to claim victory, she froze. The council was there. The pack was there. And standing at the front, flanked by a dozen warriors, was a massive male she'd never seen before, bigger even than Ronan, with scars that told stories of battles won and enemies destroyed. His eyes locked on her, cold, hungry, cruel. Kalith Vorn, the council's scarred female said, her voice carrying across the clearing. You have completed the third trial, but before you can be recognized as Alpha's mate, we have received a formal challenge. The massive male stepped forward. I am Dravik Ironclaw, Alpha of the Red Claw Pack, and I claim right of challenge for this female. Kalith's heart stopped. Your Alpha took what doesn't belong to him, Dravik continued, eyes never leaving Kalith. She was meant for a stronger pack, a stronger mate. I challenge Ronan Drax for ownership of Kalith Vorn, to the death. The pack erupted in chaos, shouts, arguments, wolves shifting forms. And Ronan stood silent, jaw tight, eyes locked on the challenger. Then, slowly, he smiled. Challenge accepted. The silence that followed Ronan's acceptance was absolute. Kalith's mind reeled, struggling to process what had just happened. She'd survived the abyss, climbed down into darkness and back, retrieved the impossible stone, proven herself beyond any reasonable doubt. And now, before she could even catch her breath, before the pack could acknowledge what she'd accomplished, this stranger had appeared to claim her like property, like she was nothing more than territory to be won. Dravik Ironclaw stepped forward, his massive frame blocking out the weak morning sun. Up close, he was even more intimidating, easily 7 feet tall in human form, shoulders broad as a bear's, arms thick with muscle, and covered in scars that formed patterns of old battles. His face was all hard angles and cruel lines, with eyes the color of dirty ice. I've waited a long time for this, Drax. Dravik's voice was deep, gravelly, the kind that seemed to come from somewhere beneath the earth. You took what should have been mine. I claimed an unmated female from a neutral pack, Ronan said, his tone flat, controlled. There was no prior claim, no challenge. You have no grounds. Don't I? Dravik's smile was razor sharp. The Vorn pack borders my territory. Any unmated female from their bloodline falls under my consideration before outside alphas. That's been the agreement for 3 generations. The council's scarred female stepped forward, her expression troubled. Alpha Ironclaw, that agreement was informal, not pack law. Informal or not, it was respected, until Drax decided his ambitions mattered more than tradition. Dravik's eyes swept the gathered pack. He came into neutral territory during a claiming ceremony and took a female without consulting neighboring alphas. That's an act of disrespect, of aggression. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others looked uncertain. Kalith realized with cold clarity what was happening. This wasn't about her. It had never been about her. This was about power, territory, and old grudges she didn't understand. She was just the excuse. The challenge stands, Dravik continued. Combat to the death. The winner claims the female and settles the question of disrespect permanently. Ronan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. When? 3 days. At the border between our territories, neutral ground. Dravik's eyes flicked to Kalith for the first time, and what she saw there made her stomach turn. Not desire, not even interest. Just cold assessment, like she was livestock. And when I win, the runt comes with me, along with your northern hunting grounds as restitution for the insult. You're betting a lot on an uncertain outcome, Ronan said quietly. There's nothing uncertain about it. Dravik turned to leave, his warriors falling into formation around him. 3 days, Drax, don't keep me waiting. They disappeared into the forest, leaving chaos behind. The pack erupted, wolves arguing, shouting, some already placing bets on the outcome. The council huddled together, voices low and urgent. Warriors clustered in groups, discussing strategy, odds, implications. And Kalith sat there on the frozen ground, still clutching the pack with the marked stone, ribs heaving, hands bleeding, and felt the world tilt sideways. She'd survived the impossible, and it didn't matter, because now Ronan had to fight for the right to keep her, and if he lost, she'd be handed over to a male who saw her as nothing more than a trophy and an excuse for war. Ronan crossed the clearing in 3 strides and crouched in front of her. "Can you stand?" Kalith nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. Ronan pulled her to her feet anyway, steadying her when her legs threatened to buckle. "You completed the trial," he said quietly. "That matters. Remember that." "Does it? Because it seems like it matters." His voice was firm. "The pack saw you climb out of the abyss. They saw you survive 3 trials designed to kill you. Druvik can challenge all he wants, but what you just did can't be undone." He turned to the council. "Witness the trial's completion. Kalith Vorn has retrieved the marked stone and returned within the time limit. The 3rd trial is past." The scarred female looked like she wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Pack law was clear. She stepped forward, her expression tight. "Trial 3 complete. Kalith Vorn has earned recognition as a female to be claimed by the victor of a challenge fight," Thane interrupted, stepping forward from the crowd. "She hasn't earned anything until the challenge is settled." "That's not how pack law works," Ronan said, his tone dangerous. "Isn't it?" Thane's smile was smug. "A challenge for a mate takes precedence over recognition ceremonies. Everyone knows that. The female's status is conditional until the challenge is resolved." Ronan looked ready to rip Thane's throat out. The council member raised her hand. "Thane is technically correct. The challenge supersedes the recognition ceremony. However," she added quickly, seeing Ronan's expression, "Kalith has still completed the trials. That fact stands regardless of the challenge's outcome." "Meaning what?" Kalith found her voice hoarse and raw. "I did all of this for nothing?" "No." Vera pushed through the crowd, face flushed with anger. "It means you've proven your worth to this pack. The challenge doesn't erase that. It just delays your official recognition." "And if Ronan loses?" Kalith's voice cracked. "What happens to me then?" No one answered. They didn't have to. Ronan's hand tightened on her arm. "I won't lose." "You don't know that." "I do." He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something beyond cold calculation there, something that might have been fury. "Druvik is strong, but he's predictable. I fought his kind before. I'll fight him again, and I'll win. And if you don't, then you run." His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "The moment I fall, you shift and you run as far and as fast as you can. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand?" Kalith wanted to argue, wanted to say something brave and defiant, but all she managed was a nod. Ronan released her and addressed the council. 3 days. I'll meet Druvik at the border. Until then, Kalith stays here, under my protection, and anyone who challenges that answers to me personally." His tone made it clear that answering to him would not be a pleasant experience. The council member nodded slowly. "Agreed. The challenge will proceed in 3 days at dawn." The crowd began to disperse, still buzzing with speculation and argument. Ronan started to lead Kalith back toward the settlement, but her legs finally gave out. She collapsed, and this time she couldn't get back up. Everything she'd held together, the pain, the exhaustion, the terror, came crashing down at once. Ronan caught her before she hit the ground. "Vera!" The healer was there instantly, hands already assessing damage. "Get her to my den, now!" Ronan lifted Kalith like she weighed nothing and carried her through the settlement. She was dimly aware of wolves watching, of whispers following them, but it all seemed very far away. The last thing she heard before consciousness slipped away was Vera's voice, grim and matter-of-fact. "She's in shock. Severe exhaustion, blood loss, hypothermia. I'm amazed she's still breathing." Then darkness took her again, kinder this time, and she let it. When Kalith woke, it was to the now familiar ceiling of Vera's healing den. Every part of her body hurt, but it was a distant, muted ache. Whatever the healer had given her was strong. "About time," Vera said from somewhere to her left. "You've been out for 18 hours. Kalith turned her head slowly. Vera sat at her workbench, grinding something that smelled medicinal and faintly rotten. Beyond her, through the open door, Calith could see darkness. Night. What? Her voice came out as a croak. Don't talk. Drink first. Vera handed her a cup of water. Calith drained it in seconds and held it out for more. The healer refilled it twice before Calith's desperate thirst was satisfied. Better? Yeah. Calith struggled to sit up. Pain shot through her ribs, but it was manageable. How bad? You lost 3 toes on your left foot. Your hands are going to scar badly. 2 ribs are cracked worse than before, and you have mild frostbite on your ears and nose. Vera's tone was clinical. But you're alive, and you'll heal. Eventually. 3 toes. Calith looked down at her bandaged foot and felt nothing. It seemed like a small price compared to everything else. The challenge, she said. How long until? Day and a half. Ronan's been preparing. Where is he? Training. He hasn't stopped since you passed out. Vera set down her grinding bowl and fixed Calith with a hard look. You need to understand something. Dravik didn't come here on impulse. This was planned, coordinated. He knew about your trials, knew when you'd finish, knew exactly when to show up for maximum impact. Someone told him. Obviously. The question is who? Vera's expression was grim. My bet is on someone in the council, or one of Thane's allies, someone who wants Ronan weakened or dead. Calith's mind raced despite the fog of exhaustion. If Dravik wins, he gets me in the northern hunting grounds. That's a massive gain for him. But what does the traitor get? Depends on who it is. If it's council, they get Ronan removed and a chance to install a more controllable alpha. If it's Thane, Vera paused. Thane's been positioning himself as Ronan's successor for years. A loss like this would give him the opening he needs to challenge for leadership. So everyone wins except me and Ronan. Welcome to pack politics. Vera returned to her grinding. It's all calculated cruelty dressed up as tradition. Calith lay back, staring at the ceiling. Her whole body ached, but her mind was sharper now, cutting through the exhaustion. There had to be a way out of this. Some angle she wasn't seeing, some strategy that could shift the odds. Vera, you said Dravik planned this. That means he studied Ronan, knows his fighting style, his strengths, his weaknesses. Probably. They fought before. Years ago, border dispute. Ronan won, but barely. Then he knows Ronan will fight with brute strength, direct confrontation. That's how alphas fight. Anything else is seen as cowardice. But what if there was information Dravik didn't have? Calith sat up again, ignoring the pain. Something that would change his strategy. Make him second guess. Vera's hand stilled. What are you thinking? I don't know yet. But Dravik came here expecting one thing, a traditional challenge fight, strength against strength. What if we gave him something else? Like what? Calith's mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. You said someone on the council might be helping him, feeding him information. That's my guess. Then we feed them false information, make them think Ronan's injured, or sick, something that would make Dravik overconfident. Vera's eyes narrowed, and when he shows up expecting an easy fight and gets the real Ronan instead, he's off balance, makes mistakes, gives Ronan an opening. It's risky. If Dravik figures out the deception, he'll be furious. Might fight even harder. He's already planning to fight as hard as he can. He wants those hunting grounds and he wants to humiliate Ronan. We can't make him more motivated than he already is. Calith swung her legs off the bedroll, testing her weight. The pain was manageable. Barely. But we can make him sloppy. Vera studied her for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. You know what? I think you might actually survive this pack after all. If Ronan wins. If Ronan wins, Vera agreed. But if he doesn't, you run. And you don't stop running until you're so far from here that no one will ever find you. It was the same advice Ronan had given. And Calith had no intention of following it. If Ronan fell, she wouldn't run. She'd find another way. The next morning, Calith forced herself out of Vera's den despite the healer's protests. Her body was a map of pain, but she could walk, could think, could act. That was enough. She found Ronan at the training grounds, sparring with 2 warriors simultaneously. Even injured and tired from days of preparation, he was devastating. A force of controlled violence that put both opponents on the defensive within seconds. But Kalith watched with a critical eye, and what she saw worried her. He was fast, strong, technically skilled, but he was also predictable. His attacks followed patterns, his defenses had tells, and if she could see them after watching for 5 minutes, someone who'd fought him before would definitely know them. Dravik would know them. Ronan finished the sparring session with both warriors on the ground, yielding. He turned and spotted Kalith, surprise flickering across his face. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough." She crossed the training ground, trying not to limp too obviously. "We need to talk." Ronan dismissed the warriors with a gesture and faced her fully. "About?" "Your fight with Dravik. You can't win with strength alone." His expression hardened. "That's the only way to win a challenge fight. Pack law says the fight is to the death. It doesn't say how." Kalith stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Dravik studied you. He knows your patterns. If you fight the way you always fight, he'll counter you. But if you fight differently, I can't fight differently. I'm an alpha. I fight with honor and strength. Anything else is weakness." "No," Kalith's voice was sharp. "Anything else is strategy. And strategy is the only reason I'm still alive." She held up her bandaged hands. "I survived 3 impossible trials because I didn't try to be stronger. I tried to be smarter. You need to do the same." Ronan stared at her like she'd suggested something obscene. "You want me to trick him? Use underhanded tactics? I want you to win. I don't care how. The pack cares. If I win through deception, then you'll be alive to deal with their opinions. If you lose, you'll be dead and I'll be Dravik's property." Kalith's voice cracked despite her best efforts to stay steady. "Please, just consider it." For a long moment, Ronan didn't respond. Then quietly, "What did you have in mind?" Kalith told him about the false information plan, about making Dravik think Ronan was weakened, injured, easy prey. Ronan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "It could work," he said finally, "but it requires the traitor to take the bait, if they're smart enough to verify. They won't have time. The fight is tomorrow at dawn. If we spread the rumor tonight, through the right channels, it'll reach Dravik by midnight. He'll have hours to adjust his strategy, convince himself it's real." Kalith met his eyes. "And when he comes in overconfident, expecting an injured opponent, you hit him with everything you have." Ronan's lips quirked in something that might have been a smile. "You've been here less than a month and you're already manipulating pack politics." "I'm trying to survive, same as always." "No." His expression softened, barely, but enough to notice. "You're trying to win. There's a difference." He turned back to the training ground, picked up a practice blade, and tossed it to her. Kalith caught it awkwardly with her bandaged hands. "What? If we're doing this, you need to sell it too. Tonight, you're going to visit me in my den, visibly worried. You're going to let people see you bringing medical supplies from Vera. You're going to look terrified that I might lose." "I am terrified you might lose." "Then it won't be hard to act the part." He picked up his own blade. "But first, let me teach you something, just in case." "In case what?" "In case everything goes wrong and you need to defend yourself." They trained for 2 hours, or rather, Ronan taught and Kalith struggled to absorb even the basics of combat. Her injured hands made gripping the blade agony, and her damaged feet made footwork impossible. But she tried anyway, because Ronan was right. If things went wrong, she'd need every advantage she could get. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and Kalith could barely stand. But she'd learned a few things: how to hold a blade properly, where to strike for maximum damage, how to use her small size and low center of gravity as advantages rather than weaknesses. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, Kalith executed the plan. She made a show of visiting Vera's den and gathering medical supplies, bandages, poultices, pain medication. Then she carried them openly through the settlement to Ronan's den, making sure multiple pack members saw her worried expression. Inside, she found Ronan preparing weapons for the next day's fight. He looked up when she entered, his expression carefully neutral for any potential observers. "People saw you. Half the pack, probably." Kalith set down the supplies. "Word will spread fast." "Good. Now we wait and see if the traitor bites." They didn't have to wait long. An hour after dark, there was movement outside the den. Hushed voices, someone leaving in a hurry. Ronan moved to the entrance and watched, silent as a shadow. When he returned, his expression was grim. Thane, heading toward the border. To tell Dravek you're injured? Probably. Ronan's jaw tightened. I knew he was ambitious, didn't think he'd stoop to treason. What will you do about it? Win tomorrow. Deal with Thane after. He moved to the weapon rack and began checking blades with methodical precision. If I fall, Thane will make his move for leadership within days, but he'll have to fight through the council first. That'll buy you time. Time for what? To run. I told you, I'm not Calith. He turned to face her, and his expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. If I die tomorrow, you run. You don't try to fight. You don't try to negotiate. You shift and you disappear into the forest, and you don't stop until you're so far from here that no pack will ever find you. Promise me. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she'd find another way, that she wouldn't abandon the pack or let Dravek win, that running was surrender. But the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't a request. It was his last order as her alpha. I promise, she lied. Ronan studied her face, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he saw right through the deception. But he didn't call her on it. He just nodded and returned to his weapons. They spent the rest of the night in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Calith tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ronan falling, Dravek's jaws closing on his throat, herself being dragged away to a life that would make her trials look merciful. So she stayed awake, watching the fire burn down to embers, and tried to think of a backup plan. Some way to shift the odds if everything went wrong. By the time dawn broke, she still hadn't found one. The border between High Peak and Red Claw territories was a stretch of barren ground between two ridgelines, neutral space claimed by neither pack. It was here that challenge fights were traditionally held, witnessed by both sides but interfered with by neither. When Calith and Ronan arrived with the High Peak pack, Dravek was already waiting. He stood in the center of the clearing, flanked by a dozen of his warriors, looking exactly as confident as Calith had hoped. His stance was relaxed, his expression smug. He'd bought the false information, thought Ronan was injured, thought this would be easy. The council's scarred female stepped forward to officiate, her voice carrying across the clearing. This is a formal challenge for the right to claim Calith Vorn as mate and settle questions of territorial disrespect. Combat will be to the death or submission. Shifted forms permitted. No interference from either pack. Do both parties accept these terms? Accepted, Dravek said. Ronan's voice was steady. Accepted. Then begin. Both alphas shifted in the same instant, bones cracking, forms expanding, fur erupting. Within seconds, two massive wolves faced each other across the clearing, each easily twice the size of a normal pack member. But where Ronan's wolf was lean and scarred, built for speed and precision, Dravek's was pure power. A mountain of muscle and teeth designed to crush opponents through sheer force. They circled each other, sizing up, looking for openings. Dravek struck first. He lunged with terrifying speed for something his size, jaws snapping for Ronan's throat. But Ronan wasn't where he expected. The supposedly injured alpha twisted aside with fluid grace, and Dravek's attack met empty air. Confusion flickered across Dravek's features. Ronan didn't give him time to process. He struck back, a blur of claws and teeth that opened 3 deep gashes across Dravek's shoulder before the larger wolf could react. First blood. Dravek snarled and pressed the attack, using his superior size to try to pin Ronan against the rocks. But Ronan was faster, ducking under the charge and tearing at Dravek's exposed flank. More blood. Calith watched from the sidelines, heart in her throat, and saw the exact moment Dravek realized he'd been deceived. His eyes widened. His movements became more cautious. He'd come expecting an easy victory over a weakened opponent, and instead found himself facing a healthy, furious alpha who'd been waiting for exactly this kind of overconfidence. The fight shifted. Dravek abandoned his aggressive strategy and fell back on defensive tactics, using his size and strength to create distance, looking for opportunities to land a killing blow. But Ronan didn't give him any. He fought with precision and controlled violence, targeting weak points, avoiding the larger wolf's crushing power, bleeding Dravik slowly through a dozen small wounds. Minutes stretched into a brutal eternity. Both wolves were bleeding now, fur matted with gore, breathing labored. The ground beneath them was stained dark. And then Dravik made a mistake. He committed too hard to an attack, overextending, leaving his throat exposed for just a fraction of a second. Ronan's jaws closed on that opening. Dravik tried to pull away, but Ronan's grip was iron. They went down in a tangle of fur and blood, rolling across the clearing, each trying to gain the upper hand. When they finally separated, Dravik's throat was torn open. Not a killing wound, but close. Blood poured from the injury. His breathing came in wet, ragged gasps. He tried to attack again, but his legs buckled. He fell. Ronan stood over him, jaws dripping blood, eyes cold as winter steel. "Submit." Ronan's voice was barely human, distorted by his shifted form. "Or die." For a long moment, Dravik just stared up at him with hatred and disbelief. Then slowly he lowered his head in submission. The fight was over. The clearing erupted. High Peak wolves howling victory. Red Claw warriors helping their fallen alpha to his feet. The council member stepped forward to make the formal declaration, but her words were lost in the chaos. Kalith didn't hear any of it. She was already moving, pushing through the crowd, ignoring the pain in her feet, focused only on reaching Ronan. He shifted back to human form as she approached, covered in blood, most of it Dravik's, but not all. Deep claw marks scored his chest and arms. One ear was torn, but he was standing. He was alive. "You won," Kalith said stupidly, because her brain couldn't process anything more complex. Ronan's lips quirked in something that might have been a smile. "You doubted me?" "Yes, constantly, the entire time." "Smart." He swayed slightly, and Kalith moved to support him. He didn't pull away. The strategy worked. He was overconfident, sloppy, made mistakes. "You still almost died." "Almost only counts with cliffs and poisons." He looked down at her, and something in his expression had changed, softened. "You saved my life with that plan. You saved mine first, with the trials. I put you in danger, and then taught me how to survive it." Kalith helped him toward where Vera was already setting up a treatment area. "We're even." "No," Ronan's voice was quiet. "We're not even close to even, but we're starting to be something else." But Kalith didn't know how to respond to that, so she just helped him sit down and let Vera take over, cleaning wounds and muttering about idiotic alphas who thought they were invincible. The formal declaration came an hour later, after both sides had tended their wounded and Dravik had limped back to his own territory, defeated and humiliated. The council's scarred female stood before the assembled High Peak pack, her expression unreadable. "Ronan Drax has won the challenge. The matter of disrespect is settled. Kalith Vorn's status as his mate is confirmed." She paused, and for the first time, something like respect entered her voice. "Furthermore, Kalith Vorn has completed all 3 trials and survived challenges that would have destroyed wolves twice her size. By pack law, she is recognized as a full member of High Peak, with all rights and protections that entails." The pack's response was mixed. Some wolves howled approval, warriors who respected strength in any form, scouts who valued cunning, younger members who'd grown tired of the old ways. Others remained silent, council members who'd wanted her to fail, Thane and his allies who'd bet on her death. But they couldn't deny what she'd done, couldn't erase her victories. For the first time since arriving in this brutal territory, Kalith wasn't an outsider. She wasn't tolerated or pitied or dismissed. She was pack. That night, as the celebration fires burned and wolves drank and fought and celebrated Ronan's victory, Kalith sat at the edge of the gathering and let herself feel it. The pain, the exhaustion, the overwhelming relief. She'd survived. Senna appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled strongly of alcohol. "You look like you could use this." Kalith took the cup and drank. It burned going down, but the warmth that followed was worth it. "Thank you for the advice, for helping me survive the hunt." "Don't thank me yet. The trials are over, but the real challenges are just starting." Senna gestured toward the crowd, where Thane stood with a cluster of warriors, his expression dark. "He knows Ronan's onto him. He'll make a move soon." "Let him try." Kalith's voice was harder than she expected. I didn't survive 3 trials just to roll over for a coward who betrays his own pack. Senna's smile was sharp with approval. See? You're learning. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the pack celebrate. Finally, Senna spoke again. You know what the strangest part of all this is? What? A month ago, no one here would have bet a scrap of meat on your survival. Now, she gestured at the crowd, where several wolves were arguing animatedly about Kaleth's climb from the abyss. They're telling stories about you. The runt who refused to die, the female who turned weakness into strategy. I'm not sure that's a compliment. It is. In this pack, being memorable is the first step to being respected. Senna stood, stretching. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you made it. This place needs wolves who think instead of just fighting. She walked away, leaving Kaleth alone with her thoughts. Across the clearing, Ronan sat with the council, discussing territory boundaries and restitution from Dravek's defeat. He caught her eye and gave a slight nod. Not a summons, just acknowledgement. We survived this. Together. Kaleth raised her cup in a small salute and drank. The fire burned bright, the pack celebrated, and for the first time since accepting Ronan's claim, Kaleth let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found something worth fighting for. Not home, not yet, but the possibility of it. And that was enough. The fire had burned down to embers by the time Kaleth finally returned to Ronan's den. Her feet ached with every step. The missing toes made her gait uneven, awkward, but she'd refused Vera's offer of help. She'd walked into this pack on her own strength. She'd walked through it the same way. Inside, Ronan sat by the low fire, cleaning blood from his weapons with methodical precision. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable in the dim light. You should be celebrating with the pack, he said. I celebrated enough. Kaleth lowered herself onto the furs with a grimace. Besides, drunk wolves make me nervous. Smart. He set aside the blade he'd been working on and reached for another. Senna told you about Thane? She mentioned he'd make a move soon. He will, probably within the week. Ronan's voice was matter-of-fact, like they were discussing weather. The council knows he fed information to Dravek. They'll demand consequences. What kind of consequences? Exile. Or execution. Depends on how much proof we have and how loudly his allies protest. He paused, studying the blade. Either way, it'll destabilize the pack. His supporters will see it as tyranny. Mine will demand justice. And in the middle of that chaos, someone else will try to make a move for power. Kaleth watched him work, noting the tension in his shoulders despite his calm tone. You knew this would happen when you claimed me. I knew claiming an outsider would create problems. I didn't anticipate how many. He glanced at her. But I also didn't anticipate you'd actually survive. That changes things. How? You're not just my mate anymore. You're proof that the system can be challenged, that strength isn't the only thing that matters. He set down the blade. The younger wolves are already talking, questioning the old ways, wondering if there's another path besides endless violence. And that scares the council. Terrifies them. Because if they admit you were right, that intelligence and strategy matter as much as physical strength, then everything they've built their authority on becomes questionable. Kaleth pulled her knees to her chest, thinking, So what do we do? We? Ronan's lips quirked slightly. This is my fight, Kaleth. You've done enough. No? Her voice was firm. We're in this together now. You said it yourself. I'm proof the system can change. That means I have a stake in what happens next. He studied her for a long moment. You've been here a month and you're already trying to reshape pack politics. I'm trying to survive. Politics just happens to be part of that now. Ronan stood and crossed to the shelves where he kept maps of the territory. He pulled one down and spread it on the floor between them. If we're doing this, you need to understand what we're up against. He pointed to various marked locations. These are the dens of council members and their closest allies. These are warriors loyal to me. These are neutral parties who could swing either way. His finger traced a cluster of dens on the western edge. And these are Thane's people. 40 warriors, give or take. All trained, all loyal to him personally, not to the pack. That's almost a third of your fighting force. Exactly. If I move against Thane directly, it'll trigger a civil war. We'd win, eventually, but the pack would be crippled, easy prey for Redclaw or the other territories. So we can't move against him. Not directly, but we can undermine his support, make his allies question whether he's worth following. Ronan looked at her, and that's where you come in. Me? You survived 3 trials designed to kill you. You helped me defeat Dravek through strategy, not brute force. And you did it all while being dismissed and underestimated by everyone around you. His eyes were intense. The wolves who are tired of the old ways, the young, the weak, the ones who've been pushed down, they see you as something different, something better. Kalith's stomach twisted with understanding. You want me to be a symbol. I want you to be yourself. The symbol part will happen on its own. And if I don't want that responsibility, then I'll find another way. But it'll be slower, cost more lives. He rolled up the map. Your choice. Kalith stared in the fire, thinking about the journey that had brought her here, the humiliation of the claiming ceremony, the brutal trials, the impossible climb from the abyss, every moment where she could have quit and didn't. She'd survived all of it by being smart, stubborn, and willing to do whatever it took. Why stop now? What do you need me to do? The plan took shape over the next 3 days. Ronan would call a pack assembly, a formal gathering where grievances could be aired and pack law discussed. It was tradition, held quarterly, and the timing was perfect. He'd present evidence of Thane's betrayal publicly, forcing the council to address it. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. They needed to show the pack that there was an alternative to the old ways. That's where Kalith came in. Vera helped her prepare, teaching her the formal protocols of pack assemblies and coaching her on how to present herself. You're not trying to be impressive, the healer explained. You're trying to be real. Show them the wolf who survived, not some polished version. I don't know how to be polished anyway. Good. Keep it that way. Senna contributed tactical advice, mapping out where different pack factions would sit during the assembly and which wolves were most likely to be swayed by Kalith's story. Focus on the mid-rank warriors, she said. They're the ones caught between the council's demands and their own doubts. Win them over and Thane loses his base. By the time the assembly arrived, Kalith was as prepared as she'd ever be, which was to say, not very. The pack gathered in the largest clearing, forming concentric circles around a central fire. The council sat in positions of honor, their expressions ranging from neutral to hostile. Thane stood with his allies, arms crossed, radiating confidence. He thought he was untouchable. Kalith took her place beside Ronan, trying to ignore the weight of hundreds of eyes on her back. The council's scarred female, Kalith had finally learned her name was Morda, called the assembly to order. We gather to address grievances and uphold pack law. Alpha Drax has called this assembly. Speak. Ronan stood, and the clearing fell silent. His presence was magnetic, commanding, impossible to ignore. I bring charges of treason against Thane Blackridge, he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. He conspired with an enemy Alpha to undermine my authority and endanger this pack. The silence shattered. Wolves erupted in shouts, arguments, demands for proof. Morda raised her hand. These are serious charges. What evidence do you present? Testimony from 3 witnesses who saw him leave the settlement the night before Dravek's challenge. Testimony from Dravek himself, extracted during our territorial negotiations. Ronan's eyes locked on Thane. And his own admission, which he'll give now. Unless he'd prefer to call me a liar in front of the pack. Thane's expression was pure fury. You're fabricating. I saw you. The voice came from the crowd. A young warrior stepped forward, face pale but determined. The night before the challenge, you met with someone at the border. I was on patrol. I saw it. Another voice. I saw you too. Thought it was strange but didn't report it. A third. You've been holding secret meetings with your allies for weeks, planning something. The accusations piled up, each one chipping away at Thane's composure. Finally, he snarled, So what if I did? Ronan's leadership is making us weak. He claims an outsider runt as his mate, loses territory to Dravek's challenge, shows mercy when he should show strength. I did what was necessary to protect this pack's future. By selling information to our enemies, Ronan's voice was ice, by orchestrating my death, by trying to save us from your failed experiment, Thane gestured at Calith with contempt. You brought weakness into our pack. Made us a laughingstock. I was trying to fix your mistake. Calith felt the words like physical blows, but she forced herself to stand tall, to meet Thane's glare without flinching. Ronan's expression was deadly calm. Counsel, the evidence is clear. Thane Blackridge conspired with an enemy to undermine pack leadership. Pack law demands a trial, Morta interrupted. Combat or council judgment. Thane, as the accused, you have the right to choose. Thane's smile was vicious. Combat. Against Ronan. Right here. Right now. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ronan had just fought Dravek 3 days ago. His wounds were barely healed. Fighting again so soon would be suicide, which was exactly what Thane was counting on. Thane, Morta said carefully, Alpha Drax is still recovering from... I accept, Ronan said. Ronan, no. Calith grabbed his arm. You're not healed. You can't. I can't refuse without looking weak. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. And if I look weak, everything we've built collapses. Then let me fight him. The words left her mouth before her brain could stop them. The clearing went dead silent. Thane stared at her like she'd grown a second head. What? Pack law allows for a champion to fight in the Alpha's place. Calith's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. I claim that right. I'll fight Thane for Ronan's honor. You? Thane's laugh was genuinely incredulous. You can barely walk. I'd crush you in seconds. Maybe, but those are my terms. You fight me, or you withdraw the challenge. Ronan's hand closed on her shoulder. Calith, this is insane. You don't have to... Yes, I do. She turned to face him. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You protected me through the trials. You taught me how to survive. Her voice dropped. Let me do this. Please. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, she realized with shock. The first real emotion she'd seen from him beyond cold calculation. You could die, he said quietly. I've been about to die since the moment I got here. This is just one more time. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Ronan nodded, his jaw tight. He turned to the council. Calith Vorn will stand as my champion. Do you accept, Thane? Thane's expression was pure contempt. This is pathetic, but fine. I'll break her just like I should have broken you. Morta looked troubled, but didn't intervene. Champion combat is permitted under pack law. The fight will proceed. Shifted forms allowed. To submission or death. No interference. The crowd pressed closer, forming a tight circle around the central space. Calith could feel their anticipation, their bloodlust. They wanted to see her destroyed. Vera appeared at her side, face pale. Tell me you have a plan. I have part of a plan. Which part? The part where I don't die immediately. That's not reassuring. I know. Calith pulled off her outer furs, leaving just the light fighting clothes underneath. Her bandaged feet would make footwork difficult. Her damaged hands would weaken her grip, and Thane outweighed her by at least 100 pounds. But she'd survived worse odds. Somehow. Listen to me, Vera said urgently. Thane fights like a brawler. All power, no finesse. He'll try to pin you fast and end it quick. Don't let him grab you. Stay mobile. Make him chase. Tire him out. And then what? Then pray. Not helpful, but honest. Calith stepped into the circle. Across from her, Thane cracked his knuckles, his smile predatory. Last chance to run, runt, he called. Calith didn't respond. She just shifted. The transformation was still painful, bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding, but she'd grown more efficient with it. Within seconds, she stood in wolf form, small, lean, scarred. Across from her, Thane shifted into something massive and terrifying, easily twice her size. Morta's voice rang out. Begin! Thane charged immediately, pure aggression, trying to end the fight before Calith could establish any strategy. But Calith had spent a month learning to survive things that should have killed her. She didn't try to meet his charge. She dove sideways, low and fast, using her smaller size to slip under his attack. Thane's jaws snapped shut on empty air. He spun, snarling, and attacked again. Caliph dodged, backpedaling, keeping distance between them. The crowd roared, some cheering, some jeering, all hungry for blood. Thane pressed forward, using his size advantage to corral Caliph against the edge of the circle. She was running out of space, so she stopped retreating. When Thane lunged again, Caliph dropped flat and rolled beneath him, raking claws across his exposed belly. The wounds were shallow, her strength couldn't penetrate deep, but they drew blood. First blood. Thane howled with rage and pain. He wheeled around and slammed into her with his full weight, sending Caliph tumbling across the clearing. Pain exploded through her ribs, the ones that had never fully healed from the first trial. She struggled to her feet, gasping. Thane was on her in seconds, jaws closing on her shoulder. Caliph yelped and twisted, pulling free but leaving fur and skin behind. Blood soaked her coat. She was losing, badly. Thane knew it too. His attacks became more confident, more brutal. He was toying with her now, drawing out her suffering. Caliph's vision blurred. Her legs shook. She'd pushed her damaged body too far, too fast. Get up, she told herself. Get up or die. She got up. Thane circled her, savoring the moment. Submit. I'll make it quick. Caliph's response was to lunge at his throat. She missed. Her exhausted muscles couldn't deliver the speed she needed, but she got close enough to tear at his face. Her claws caught his left eye, and Thane screamed. He retaliated with a massive paw strike that sent her flying. Caliph hit the ground hard, ribs screaming, and this time she couldn't get up. Thane approached slowly, blood streaming from his ruined eye, his remaining eye burning with hatred. You should have stayed in your old pack, Runt, died quietly. Instead, you came here and made everything worse. He placed one massive paw on her chest, claws digging in. Any last words? Caliph's wolf form couldn't speak, but she shifted back to human despite the agony it caused, needing to say this in a voice everyone could hear. You're right, she gasped. I did make things worse. For you. Confusion flickered across Thane's features, and in that moment of hesitation, Caliph grabbed the knife she'd hidden in her clothes. The one Ronan had given her during their training, the one she'd kept strapped to her thigh, and drove it upward into the soft tissue beneath Thane's jaw. The same move that had hurt him in the first trial. Except this time, she didn't let go. Thane's eye went wide with shock and pain. He tried to pull away, but Caliph held on, putting every ounce of remaining strength into keeping that blade embedded. They stayed frozen like that for a long moment. Thane standing over her, Caliph on her back with the knife in his throat. Then slowly, Thane's legs buckled. He collapsed beside her, blood pouring from the wound, his breathing wet and labored. Caliph rolled away and forced herself to stand, swaying badly. She looked down at Thane, who was trying to speak but could only manage gurgles. Submit, she said quietly, or die. For a long moment, Thane just stared at her with his remaining eye, full of hatred and disbelief. Then he shifted back to human form and pressed one hand to his throat, stemming the bleeding. I submit. The words were barely audible, but they were enough. The clearing erupted in chaos, some wolves cheering, others shouting in outrage, still others simply stunned into silence. Caliph stood there, covered in blood, most of it hers, and met Morda's shocked gaze. Trial complete, the council member said, her voice shaking slightly. Caliph Vorn wins. Thane Blackridge is found guilty of treason. What's the sentence? Someone called from the crowd. Morda looked at Ronan. Ronan stepped forward, his expression carved from stone. Exile. Effective immediately. Thane Blackridge, you are stripped of rank and cast out from High Peak territory. If you return, you'll be killed on sight. It was a mercy, Caliph realized. Execution would have turned Thane into a martyr for his supporters. Exile made him a failure, a warning. Thane was hauled to his feet by warriors, his wound wrapped hastily to prevent him from bleeding out before they could remove him from Packlands. As he was dragged past Caliph, he spat blood at her feet. This isn't over, he rasped. Yes, Caliph said tiredly. It is. She watched him disappear into the forest, surrounded by guards, and then her legs finally gave out completely. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Ronan, I've got you, he said quietly. I won, Caliph mumbled, consciousness fading. You did. Did you see? I used the knife move. Just like you taught. I saw. Now shut up and let Vera work. But there was something in his voice that made Caleth smile despite the pain. Pride. She'd made him proud. That was worth all of it. The recovery took weeks. Vera kept Caleth in the healing den for 10 days, treating wounds and preventing infections. The shoulder injury from Thane's bite was the worst. Deep enough to scar badly, but not quite bad enough to cripple. Ronan visited every day, usually late in the evening when the pack had settled. They didn't talk much. He'd sit by the fire, working on weapons or maps, and she'd rest, too exhausted for conversation. But his presence was steady, reliable. It mattered. On the 11th day, Vera finally cleared her to leave. The wounds are healing. You'll have scars, a lot of them. And you're going to hurt for a long time, but you'll live. Good enough. Caleth limped out of the healing den into afternoon sunlight and found the settlement transformed. Word of her victory over Thane had spread beyond High Peak, to neighboring packs, to wandering rogues, to every corner of the Northern Territories. Wolves talked about the runt who'd survived impossible trials and defeated a warrior twice her size. Some called her lucky, others called her cunning. A few called her something else, the future. Pack members who'd dismissed her before now nodded respectfully when she passed. Young wolves asked questions about her strategies. Even some of Thane's former supporters approached cautiously, testing whether this new order would be better than the old. Caleth didn't know how to handle any of it. She'd spent her whole life invisible. Being seen, really seen, was terrifying in its own way. Ronan found her that evening, standing at the edge of the settlement and staring out at the forest. Avoiding people? He asked, trying to figure out what happens now. He stood beside her, silent for a moment. Then, the pack's changing. Because of you. I didn't mean to change anything, I just wanted to survive. That's exactly why it's working. You didn't try to overthrow the system. You just refused to let it destroy you. He glanced at her. And in refusing, you showed everyone else that refusal was possible. Caleth turned to face him. What do you want, Ronan? Really? You claimed me for strategic reasons, but this has become more than strategy. So what's the end game? He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. I want a pack where strength matters but isn't the only thing that matters. Where intelligence and loyalty and courage count for something. Where wolves like you don't have to nearly die 3 times just to prove they deserve to exist. That's a nice dream. It's more than a dream now. You made it real. We made it real, Caleth corrected. You gave me the chance. I just took it. Ronan's hand found hers, rough, scarred, steady. We make a good team. Yeah, we do. They stood like that for a while, watching the sun set over the mountains, and Caleth realized something had shifted between them. Not love, exactly. It was too soon, too complicated for that word, but partnership, trust, the foundations of something that might become love eventually. There's something else, Ronan said. The council wants to make your position official, not just Alpha's mate, but pack strategist. A formal rank with authority. Caleth's stomach twisted. I don't want authority. You already have it. This just makes it official, gives you protection, a voice in pack decisions. And what if I use that voice to change things people don't like? Then we deal with it together. He squeezed her hand. What do you say? Caleth thought about her journey, the claiming ceremony where no one wanted her, the trials that should have killed her. The moment she'd driven a knife into Thane's throat and refused to be dismissed ever again. She'd survived by being smart, stubborn, and willing to fight for every inch of ground. Why stop now? Okay, she said. I'll do it. The formal ceremony happened 3 days later. The entire pack gathered as Morda presented Caleth with a carved token, a small wolf made of bone marked with symbols representing strategy and wisdom. It was tradition, Ronan had explained, a physical representation of her new role. Caleth Vorn, Morda said, her tone formal but not unkind. You have proven yourself through trials of strength, cunning, and will. You have defended this pack's honor and shown us new paths forward. By pack law and Alpha's command, you are named strategist and counsel. Your voice will be heard, your wisdom valued. Caleth took the token, feeling its weight. It was just carved bone, but it represented everything she'd fought for. recognition, respect, a place to belong. The pack howled approval, not universal, but strong enough to matter. And as the sound echoed across the mountains, Calith felt something she'd never expected to feel in this brutal territory. Hope. The months that followed weren't easy. Change never was. Some wolves embraced the new direction, younger members especially, tired of watching friends die in pointless challenges. They came to Calith with ideas, strategies, questions about how to be strong in ways that didn't require violence. Others resisted. Old warriors who'd spent their lives believing strength was everything. Council members who saw their authority threatened. Traditionalists who thought Calith's presence corrupted pack purity. There were challenges, arguments, a few fights, but Ronan backed her completely. And slowly, grudgingly, the pack adapted. Training changed. Instead of pure combat drills, they added strategy sessions, tactical planning, ways to avoid fights instead of just winning them. Trials changed too. New pack members still had to prove themselves, but the trials were redesigned to test multiple strengths, not just physical power. And the pack's reputation changed. Word spread that High Peak wasn't just brutal anymore. It was smart, dangerous in new ways. Other packs started sending representatives to observe their training methods. Some even requested alliances. It was working. Calith's relationship with Ronan evolved too. The strategic partnership deepened into genuine friendship. They spent evenings discussing pack matters, debating decisions, challenging each other's assumptions. And somewhere in those conversations, friendship became something more. It happened gradually. So slowly, Calith didn't notice until one night when Ronan was explaining a territorial dispute, and she realized she wasn't listening to his words anymore. She was just watching him, the way firelight caught the scars on his face, the intensity in his eyes when he talked about protecting the pack. And she thought, I care about him, really care. The realization was terrifying, but also right. Later that night, after the conversation had wound down and they sat in comfortable silence, Calith spoke without thinking. I'm glad you claimed me. Ronan looked up, surprised. Even after everything? The trials, the pain, almost dying repeatedly? Even after all that? Because this, she gestured around the den, at the pack beyond, at him. This is the first place I've ever belonged, really belonged. Ronan set aside the map he'd been studying. I claimed you for strategic reasons, but somewhere along the way it stopped being strategy. What is it now? I don't know yet, but I want to find out. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. If you want that too. Calith's heart hammered, but she didn't pull away. Yeah, I do. They sat like that, hands linked, and let the future unfold at its own pace. 6 months after her arrival, Calith stood on a ridge overlooking High Peak territory and took stock of everything that had changed. The settlement was more organized now, stronger. Patrols ran smarter routes. Alliances with neighboring packs had reduced border conflicts by half. Young wolves trained with weapons and strategy alongside traditional combat. And Calith herself, she'd gone from invisible to indispensable. The runt no one wanted had become the voice the pack listened to. Her scars, physical and otherwise, were proof of survival, of refusal to break. She wasn't perfect, still small, still scarred, still carrying injuries that would never fully heal, but she was respected, and that was enough. Footsteps approached from behind. Ronan joined her on the ridge, standing close. Thinking? He asked. Remembering. The claiming ceremony. Standing there knowing no one would choose me. I chose you. For the wrong reasons. For practical reasons, he corrected. Which became the right reasons eventually. Calith leaned against him, and his arm came around her shoulders naturally. Do you ever regret it? All the chaos I brought? Every day. He paused. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. She laughed. You're terrible at romantic declarations. I'm terrible at romance in general, but I'm very good at recognizing value when I see it. He turned her to face him. You changed this pack. Changed me. Made us better. We changed each other. Yeah, we did. He kissed her then, gentle, careful, like she was something precious instead of the battle-scarred survivor she'd become. When they finally pulled apart, Calith realized the sun was setting. painting the mountains in shades of gold and fire. "Come on," Ronan said. "Council meeting in an hour. They'll want your input on the new alliance terms." "They want your input. I just make it sound smarter." "Exactly. That's why we're a team." They walked back toward the settlement together, and Calith felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness exactly. Life in High Peak was still hard, still brutal in many ways. But contentment, purpose. The knowledge that she'd fought for her place here and won. She was no longer the wolf no one wanted. She was the wolf who'd proven that strength came in many forms. The one who'd survived the impossible. The one who'd changed everything. And that was worth every scar.